and schedule a visit. I'm going to give the information to the city clerk. And yeah, thank you so much for letting me talk about myself a little bit tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Deirdre Sheeran, and I don't have a problem with no mic. My name is Deirdre Sheeran, and I live at 319 West Thompson, and I come here tonight as the CEO of Sweetwater Spectrum, and I am pleased to announce the 2015 plant sale dates. Woo! We have been, in our beautiful greenhouse, have been making plant starts since early March, and we are going to be ready for big sales on Saturday, April 4th, April 18th, May 2nd, and May 16th. I will give some of these flyers to the city clerk. We are at 730 West Spain Street, and I encourage you to come and get these beautiful vegetable starts for your summer gardens. But I also encourage you to come and meet your neighbors at Sweetwater Spectrum. We've been in residency for 2 years now, and there are some really phenomenally amazing human beings there that have helped with getting these starts going. But we're housing for persons with autism, and we are really, after 2 years of residency and people are settled, we really are starting to kind of dig into the community and be a part of the community. At Jack London, we're going to be a part of the Theater Alliance, the newly named Theater Alliance this summer. We're at the library now, and so this is just another opportunity for you to meet some of your special neighbors. So looking forward to seeing you at 730 West Spain Street, the 4th of April, the 18th of April, May 2nd, and May 16th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the public? If not, do we have any meeting dedications from the council? Seeing none, I'll go into the presentations. If I could have Surveyor Phil Danskin please come to the mic. I'll speak loud. Is that okay? It's still not working?
No.
Well, first of all, thank you for
Thank you for the honor.
Test.
Whereas surveying has been an essential element in the development of the human environment since the beginning of recorded history, and it is a requirement in the planning and execution of nearly every form of construction, from its most familiar modern uses in the fields of transport, building and construction, communications, mapping, and the definition of legal boundaries for land ownership. Whereas many services are now provided through the use of sophisticated surveying equipment and techniques, including satellite-borne remote sensing devices and automated positioning, measuring, recordings, and plotting equipment. Therefore, I, David Cook, the mayor of Sonoma, do hereby proclaim March 15th to March 21st, which is my birthday, 2015, shall be National Surveyors Week. Would you like to say a little bit to the crowd?
I would. Thank you, Mayor.
And I
Just a quick thing. I used to be the editor of the California Surveyor from 1998 to 2004.
And usually you don't turn your back on the mayor, but you can
Okay,
turn around.
okay, I'm sorry.
No, so they can hear you.
Okay.
Turn
Anyway, I represent California Land Surveyors Association, and I just wanted to share with you it's National Surveyors Week, and I wanted to share with you something that's local. And so what I wanted to do is give you a little facts on the federal surveying program that used to monitor differential levels in the valley. And one of the importance of levels is to make sure things go downhill at the right water drainage, et cetera, sewer, et cetera, the peripheral canal, et cetera. And some of you know that the canal is subsiding, the valley's subsiding because they're taking too much water out, and the canal is actually buckling. And there is concern that it could spill over. Okay, and the federal government used to have surveyors that would do these astronomically precise levels circuits through the state and country, and they are no longer funded. So as National Surveyors Week, we as surveyors are asked to go out and take GPS readings of local benchmarks and turn this into the National Geodetic Survey. They massage this stuff and they'll come up with some, the geodesists will come up with some numbers of what the geoid looks like, the Earth, okay? So that said, I thought it would be fun to do something locally, which is Sonoma. Corned beef, cabbage, new potatoes, and okay, we haven't got that wrong side. Okay, 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 that's right. Okay, Watmar
Test.
Road has a bridge going over it, and I understand that that's going to be replaced someday. West of the bridge is a benchmark set in 1935, and in 1935 it had an elevation of 43 feet. Well, anyway, last year, July, I took my GPS gear out there and sat on that benchmark for 4 hours, which is pretty accurate, pretty precise. We came up with an elevation difference of about 4 inches. It has settled from 1951 to 2014. Then the August American Canyon quake happened, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to see what, is it working? No. Okay. Oh, it is, okay. So the American Canyon quake happened last August, so I thought, what the heck, let's go out, and last week we went and did another reading. And what's interesting is post-quake, the elevation went up 2 inches approximately, and the ground moved towards Petaluma about 2 inches. And the reason for, I guess, surveying and what it does benefit society is, say, the ground is subsiding between here and the sewer plant. You want to know where that ground is subsiding. Otherwise, we got problems. So that's it for me. I won't take any more of your time. I'm honored, and thank you for giving us this presentation. Thank you very much.
Now, at this time, I'd like to have a presentation by the Sonoma County Water Agency regarding their proposed water transmission budget and wholesale water rate increase for fiscal year 15-16.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come out and tell you a little bit about what our budget looks like for fiscal year 15-16. Just to get you up to speed on where we're at today, the Technical Advisory Committee, a body made up of general managers and utilities managers from across the contractors that purchase water from the water agency, unanimously approved the proposed budget and the rates that go along with it. And our restructured agreement for water supply requires that our board of directors, that is the Sonoma County Water Agency Board of Directors, approve the rates and budget by April 30th of each year. So we'll be going in early April to present the budget to them. Prior to that, we'll actually be taking this budget to the Water Advisory Committee, of which Councilmember Gallion is a member, and they'll hear a presentation and then vote either to recommend or not recommend the budget and the rates to our board of directors. So without much further ado, we'll get right to what most people are interested in, and that is our rates and the rate increases from the prior year. The Sonoma Aqueduct rates are in the right-hand column. You'll see that at the bottom there's a total overall increase of 5.46%. But this is a budget that allows the agency to meet the operations, maintenance, capital, and regulatory demands of the system. It assumes reasonable deliveries in line with recent years, even taking into account the drought. And it allows fund balances to remain within policy for prudent reserve, which is 3 months operating expenses. The rate increases are also within our long-range financial plan target of 4 to 6%. One thing I'd point out is, if you'll note under discretionary charges, which is just a few lines up from the total overall increase, you'll see that those are charges that are imposed by the contractors, not the water agency. And there is an increase of $19.50 for the Sonoma Aqueduct, bringing it up to $33 per acre foot. And that increase First off, what this fund does is it allows the contractors to put monies aside each year so that when large capital projects come along and they need to be paid for, that they're not getting hit all at once. Many of the expenses are shared equally amongst all contractors across the system, but capital projects that benefit only those contractors on a specific branch of the aqueduct will have to pay for those, and that's what this fund is set up to do. There's a few things that are coming up in the next couple years. Most importantly is the Sonoma Booster Station system upgrades. So this is an upgrade. This upgrades the reliability of the existing Sonoma Booster pump station to add standby pumping capacity, upgrade standby power facilities, install an outlet surge tank, and mitigate the seismic hazard risks associated with the nearby Bennett Valley Fault. We're still evaluating scope and implementation options that will achieve the stated goals of the project while keeping costs to customers to a minimum. But overall, the cost of this project is going to be between $5 and $7 million. Construction would begin in fiscal year 16-17, but more likely it will start in fiscal year 17-18. What the bar chart you see breaks down is if we didn't have the increase in the discretionary capital charge, the overall increase would be 3.76%. But this, I wanted to show you how important it is to fund the Aqueduct Capital Fund. So the Santa Rosa Aqueduct Capital Fund currently has $2.9 million in it. Petaluma Aqueduct Capital Fund has about $2.5 million in it. And the Sonoma Aqueduct Capital Fund at the end of this year will have about $663 in it. So that's good. Obviously, you're not going to build up enough fund balance to pay for a $5 to $7 million project. But what it does is it allows us to finance less, and that lowers the burden in future years for the payment of this project. What the Sonoma Booster Station really is an integral part of the system. It's what delivers water all the way out here from Santa Rosa, and it's paramount that that keeps operating. There have been instances when, because of the lack of standby at the system, there was a risk of losing water out here. We had to we worked very closely with City of Sonoma and Valley of the Moon Water District so that they could kick on their local supply and reduce the demand on the system so that we could continue to maintain that flow. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about how we develop the rate. This is right out of the restructured agreement for water supply. It's very scripted. We basically take the average of the last 3 years' annual deliveries or the last 12 months of actual water deliveries, whichever is less, and then divide that into the total cost of operations and maintenance, and that gives us a cost of water in dollars per acre foot. So if the last 3 years' annual water deliveries was 52,891 acre feet, but the last 12 months was 50,590, we would use the 50,590. If cost of operations is around 42.3 million, you get a cost of water of $836 an acre foot. So it's a pure volumetric charge. There's no fixed part of it. But it's pretty straightforward, the calculation. Our budget is broken down. I'm sorry, I realize that font's pretty small for those in the audience, but half of the costs go to operations and maintenance, about $22 million. Another large chunk, $9.4 million, goes to things like biological opinion compliance, which ensures our water supply going into the future, our Russian River water supply. Another and also in that $9.4 million includes water supply planning and water conservation. And as you know, in a drought, that's a pretty important component of our overall budget. Capital projects make up about $8.6 million, or 20% of our budget. And then we have debt service of about 7%, $3.2 million that we have to pay for. We're also using fund balance of $1.7 million. That use of fund balance is using reserves that we have above our prudent reserve to cushion the rate impacts to ratepayers. We're always conscious of not doing what you see happen in some areas, like Santa Clara Valley Water District is increasing rates by about 19%. We like to avoid rate spikes, and it makes it more predictable for the consumer. It makes revenue more predictable for the water agency. This is just a comparison between this year and last year. Overall increases are going up about $1.8 million. A big chunk of that is work being done in the Russian River watershed to keep us compliant with the biological opinion. And then, you know, there's a lot of talk about the drought right now, and I want to talk about what we've done from a financial perspective to help mitigate some of the impacts that can happen. That formula that I showed you earlier, if you were to reduce at all the water sold, the acre feet sold in a given year, that's going to drive up the overall rate, assuming that the expenses remain fairly constant. Last year, we didn't use either the average of the last 3 years' annual water deliveries or the last 12 months' actual water deliveries. Instead, the Water Advisory Committee asked us to use 46,000 acre feet, which was far less. This was to be in line with what we were asking our consumers to do in cutting back 20%. Frankly, I thought that was going to be a pretty conservative figure and that there was no way people were going to cut back that much, because that's like about a 5,000 acre foot reduction. But believe it or not, where we're projected right now is somewhere between 46 and 47,000 acre feet sold by the end of the year. Now, if we had done just that with no other changes, all things held constant, we would have seen rate increases of over 13%. And we didn't feel like that was something that was tenable or something that the contractors or the ultimate consumers of the water would want to do. So we budgeted almost $6 million in use of fund balance to soften the impact to the ratepayers. That brought it down to about 3.6%. Now I'm just going to go into and talk a little bit about some of the capital projects that we're doing right now. One of the biggest capital projects that we're going to complete this next year is the replacement of the existing fish ladder in the Russian River, located at the Water Agency's Mirabel Inflatable Dam near Forestville. As I mentioned, it's required by the biological opinion. It provides for unimpeded fish passage up the river, and we're including about $1.5 million in the fiscal year 15-16 budget, but that will complete the project and it will be done. Additionally, we were able to secure about $1.4 million in funding from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to help offset costs for that project. Another really important project that we have is the installation of additional isolation valves at strategic locations throughout the water supply transmission system. It enhances system reliability following a seismic event, and the project will facilitate repairs in the event of a rupture. I want to mention that we're budgeting about $3.5 million in the budget, but we have FEMA funding for the overall project of $1.9 million to help offset costs to the ratepayers. Another really important project that we're working on is the upgrade of the aqueduct's cathodic protection system. This is a system that reduces corrosion. Anytime you've got water and metal, obviously you run the risk of corrosion. This system that we'll be installing is an impressed current system. I'm not an engineer, but I'm impressed. So, anyway, we have about $710,000 in the 15-16 budget for that work. $7.8 million. That's the amount of money that the Water Agency has received in grants for the water transmission in the last 3 to 4 years. We work very hard to make sure that we can keep a system that's reliable, that's on 100% of the time, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Unlike your PG&E or your internet or your cable, we never go down, and we never will. But that has a cost, and what we want to do is spread that cost fairly, evenly, but also look for ways to mitigate those impacts to the ratepayers. And we have been pretty successful in the last few years with seeking grants. So next steps for me, I'm going all over the county talking to city councils and district boards about this budget, and I'm sure they're all really excited to hear from me. I'm excited to see them. But the next official step will be a vote by the Water Advisory Committee on April 6th. And then shortly thereafter, we'll have adoption by our board of directors by April 30th. Once again, this is a responsible budget that allows the agency to meet its operations, maintenance, capital, and regulatory demands of the system. It assumes reasonable deliveries in line with recent years, allows fund balances to remain within policy for the prudent reserve, and the rate increases are within our long-range financial plan. I'm here to answer any questions, and I've even brought an engineer along with me if you have any questions.
Is there any questions from the council? I guess nobody?
Oh, no, I'm pretty much familiar.
Okay. I guess the only question I have is going back to the aqueduct.
Yeah.
Why are the other two funded and Sonoma's not? What was the thought there?
There's a couple factors there. One is that Sonoma has kept its rate Sonoma and Valley of the Moon. When I say Sonoma, I mean the Sonoma Aqueduct. Sonoma Aqueduct customers has kept its rate even with Santa Rosa and Petaluma. Well, Santa Rosa and Petaluma sell more water. So they're right there. That's going to be a effect. So if your effect on how much goes in. On top of that, we've done a couple of large projects, including the Eldridge Madrone pipeline, and that kind of took a lot of funds out of that. And perhaps it would have been wise to put more money in, but for whatever reason, more money, though that rate was never increased. It was always kept the same as the other ones, as the other aqueducts. So that's why it's.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious.
No, it's a good question. I want to be clear. That's not necessarily an irresponsible thing. That is a discretionary fund. I mean, so it's. I don't want to put anybody in the position of feeling like they did something irresponsible. It wasn't like.
No,
that.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
I just want to make a comment.
Vice Mayor Gallion?
So, Michael, you can definitely vouch at this point, because when you're talking capital improvements, it's not that these other aqueducts are not doing capital improvements. It's just that this is our scope of work that's being outlined for us at this time. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Because I know there have been valve replacements, and certainly
Yes.
anyone who's driven in Santa Rosa has experienced that within the last 2 years.
Yeah, in fact, the valve replacement project is one that's borne by everybody because it's seen as a benefit to everybody. So that one is we just completed a 10-year project in replacing air valves throughout the system, and that was a water transmission. Everybody chipped in and paid for that. So.
Yes, Councilmember Edwards?
So I have a quick question on you have a 600,000 debt service reduction coming up.
Yeah.
What's the projected payoff of the rest of that debt with that is it 3.2 million that goes out every year in debt service?
Yeah, so you're asking how long will we be paying that out? Well, we just refunded our debt. That's why you see it went down. We got more favorable terms. We got a better interest rate. So that's 20 years at this point. But the way it works is there will be other projects that are going to come along. We're going to refinance that and we'll roll it in, always looking for opportunities. Even, on dollars that big, even a couple points make a big difference. So.
And what is the total amount that's financed at this point?
Right now I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get back to you with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I don't see any other questions up here, so thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it.
And next we have the presentation of Regional Climate Protection Agency's countywide greenhouse gas reduction implementation program. I won't say it.
Thank you.
I stay away from some of those words, yeah.
Implementation program, yeah. Thank you, Mayor Cook and council members. My name is Misty Mersich. I'm with the Regional Climate Protection Authority. And I'm here to just give you a very brief update on our Climate Action 2020 project. You might remember that items came to you back in February of last year for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Implementation Program, also known as the GRIP. And we've since changed the name to Climate Action 2020, a little easier to say, and kind of makes a little bit more sense for us. So this slide, I just have a very brief snapshot of climate action in Sonoma County. Our county and members, cities, and the county have all been leaders in climate action in Sonoma County. This is just a super brief snapshot starting in 2002 when all Sonoma County communities, all 10 jurisdictions, including the city of Sonoma, committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. They thought it was really important. In 2005, all Sonoma County communities committed to a target of reducing emissions 25% below 1990 levels by the year 2015. In 2008, the Community Climate Action Plan, which was created by the nonprofit The Climate Protection Campaign, they created the first Community Climate Action Plan. And in 2009, my agency, the Regional Climate Protection Authority, was legislatively created to help all the cities reach their greenhouse gas reduction goals. And then today we have the Climate Action 2020 project, which is a regional program for all cities in the county. So Climate Action 2020 is a collaborative effort among all cities in the county, and really what we're looking to is build upon our efforts to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As you might recall, this project is funded by a California State Strategic Growth Council grant. It was a community plannings grant. We got $1 million, which included $35,000 per city for staff time. So I'm working with some of your planning staff, and we have some money that covers their time. We also got money from the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District to help with some CEQA funding. And then the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is also pitching in a little bit of money to help with what we're calling a Model Policy Implementation Toolkit, which is kind of just a lot of words to say that we want to be able to not just have a plan that sits on the shelf, but also be able to implement it. So we're looking at how we can like flesh out some of the codes or some of the programs in more detail than just what's in a planning document. So this is a brief list of our accomplishments to date. We've conducted a policy gap analysis of all of the City of Sonoma's current policies and how examine how far that will get you to your greenhouse gas reduction goals. We've updated our greenhouse gas inventories, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And we are currently examining and quantifying greenhouse gas reduction strategies, so what policies and programs the City of Sonoma and all the other cities want to look at and adopt to help reach further goals. We've released something called Climate Ready Sonoma County, which was our climate hazards and vulnerability study, which is where we looked in depth at climate adaptation. So not just reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but how we can adapt to climate change that's happening now. And had lots of extensive public outreach. I've been speaking to whoever wants to hear from me. We had a community workshop here in Sonoma in January of 2014, where we had, I believe, almost 40 members from the public who attended. I've been, like I said, lots of presentations. And then we also have a stakeholder advisory group, which is made up of almost about 40 members throughout the county, including 3 from the City of Sonoma that have been kind of guiding us on this process. So this is our countywide emissions by sector for the year 2010. Oh no, one of them didn't come through, the purple. Luckily, oh, and the other one. Well, I know what they are, so it's fine. And I can update that and resend it to you. The green there is transportation. So as you can see, over 50% of our emissions come from the transportation sector. Most of that is from passenger cars. We don't have a lot of other alternatives in Sonoma County, as you know, to driving our vehicle most places. The blue is building energy, so that's about 33%. So over 30% of our emissions come from building energy. The purple there is what we call off-road transportation, so a lot of some agriculture equipment or lawnmowers, things like that. The pink there is agriculture, and that's mostly from dairy cows and a little bit from fertilizer, but mostly from dairy cows. And the turquoise there, solid waste, is 4%. And then we have wastewater and water conveyance there at the top that are both less than 1%. So the main emissions here are our transportation and building energy. And if you wanted to see, so that's countywide emissions there. And then for the city specific, we don't include the agriculture. And category names are all missing. So that's not going to help you. But the large green there is transportation. The blue is building energy. So they're both very similar to countywide. And we've noticed that all the cities are very similar. And I'll make sure that you haven't updated that. So what's next? So this is just a brief update. We're still in the project, in the midst of the project. Currently, right now, I'm working with your city planning staff on looking at possible greenhouse gas policies and programs, and we're examining different target possibilities for the year 2020. And then we hope to have a public draft to be released in the summer of this year. And then we'll also be doing extensive public outreach at that time. And so that's a time when we'll also be asking for public comment on the draft. So that will be, we're saying June, July, summer of this year. And then we're hoping to have the full plan adopted by the end of this year, which would mean that we would come back to your council with the final plan so that you can adopt the measures that are appropriate for your city. We're thinking of this as it's a regional document with kind of a chapter for each city. So you only adopt what we worked with your staff to work on and what you are willing to. This is another way to say the same thing in the project schedule. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there any questions on the implementation program? Yes.
Misty, thank you so much. I wanted to ask the 52% emissions, how is that determined? Do you have models or you have something that examines emissions? How is that determined?
Yeah, so for the transportation sector, a lot of that has to do with the Sonoma County transportation model, and also state data and DMV data kind of all goes into that model, and it's calculated on what emissions are attributed to your city, how many people drive through your city, how many people drive from origin destination, so where they start and then where they go. It's a lot of modeling because we're not tracking cars individually, but we have the local Sonoma County transportation model, and then that's double checked with the MTC model, so there's some sort of rigorous, accuracy somewhat.
So you use Transportation Authority
Yes,
for this?
the Sonoma County Transportation Authorities, yes.
Is there any other questions or comments? Vice Mayor Gallion?
So are we getting better or are we getting worse?
You mean
And-
emissions?
Yes.
I think we're getting better. I think the state is going to help us a lot. The fact that we have AB 32 and we have the low carbon fuel standard and a lot of those is definitely helping us. It's really hard at the local level, especially smaller cities, to see the needle move a lot, especially when the transportation sector. Building energy sector, Sonoma Clean Power is going to help us a lot, as well as more efficient codes and buildings. So I'd say yes, we are.
All right, so help is on the way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions from the staff or from the council? Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
At this time, we'll move to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specify items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Is there any council questions before we go to public? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to public.
Hi, I'm a little confused about procedure. My name is Jerry Bernhout. I'm an environmental attorney. I just wanted to comment on Misty Mersage's presentation. Is that acceptable?
Those were presentations. At closing comments, you could, but how long will it take?
I'll make it brief.
Okay.
Okay. I'm an environmental lawyer. I went to the last meeting of the Stakeholders Advisory Committee. There are some major problems with this whole program. Just briefly, there's basically an exemption for the wine industry. The wine industry has destroyed thousands of trees. I think people understand that trees sequester carbon. That's all lost carbon sequestration. When the trees are cut down, they discharge carbon. This county produces a lot of wine that has a global distribution system. Enormous carbon impact, not accounted for at all in this program. That's just, those are, the immediate obvious problems. This program is oriented towards reducing stabilizing parts per million at 450. All the most respected experts say that we need to go back from our current 400 level to 350. These goals are all stated in metric tons. There's certain amount of confusion about the translation. This is, in my estimation, a very flawed program.
Thank you. Could you send me an email on that?
I'd be glad to.
And I appreciate that.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, we are on the consent calendar. Is there any members of the public that would like to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and action. Council Member Gallion.
I would like to move to approve the consent calendar for Monday, March 16th.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and we have a second. City Clerk, could we call for a roll call vote if there's no more discussion? Roll call vote.
Councilmember Hundley. Aye. Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Gallion.
Aye.
Mayor Cook.
Aye. And for public, we just approved the consent calendar, which was the approval of the minutes of March 2nd. the acceptance of a bid to partially paint the fire station, and the adoption of a budget adjustment in the amount of $318,000 for the construction of the well number 8 on the Field of Dreams. Consent calendar for the successor agency. Is there any comments or questions? If not, I will go to public. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for discussion and action. Councilmember Agramonte.
If there are no questions or comments, I move to approve 5A, approval of the portions of the minutes of March 2nd, 2015.
I will second that motion.
City Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Could I call for a roll call vote?
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Aye.
Councilmember Gallion.
Aye.
Mayor Cook.
Aye. Now we're going to public hearings. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to conduct the first reading of an ordinance of the City of Sonoma requiring the licensing of tobacco retailers and amending Chapter 7.25 of the Municipal Code. City Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cook, members of the City Council. The Council has been discussing issues of smoking legislation since mid-2014, when the Council opened the discussion of establishing tobacco retailers licensing program within the city limits of Sonoma. So fast forward to 2015, and on February 2nd, staff presented a draft of an ordinance requiring the licensure of tobacco retailers and amending Chapter 7.25 of the Municipal Code. At that meeting, staff and the Associate City Attorney presented optional language sections, which we referenced as plugins, which had been incorporated into a draft ordinance for discussion. Following public comment and discussion by the council and council deliberations, the council directed certain changes to the draft ordinance which had been presented. Staff has incorporated those changes with the exception of the issue of increasing the age of the purchase of, increasing the age for the purchase of tobacco. So the ordinance in your agenda tonight, which is presented for first reading, encompasses all forms of tobacco and tobacco-related products, including any electronic device that delivers nicotine or other substances by means of inhaling. And as I previously mentioned, what is not included in the TRL ordinance before you is a provision to raise the age to 21 for persons to purchase tobacco and/or tobacco-related products. Although the council discussed the potential to include this subject in the TRL ordinance, staff has determined that it is not prudent at this time because of the pending state Senate Bill 151 introduced on January 29th, 2015, which raises the age to 21 statewide. So the TRL ordinance can be amended if passed in the future if necessary once the outcome of SB 151 is determined. The TRL ordinance will implement a process to obtain the retailer license from the city. The annual license fee of $246 collected under the program will fund the compliance monitoring program, which will include a youth decoy sting operation coordinated by the police chief and the sheriff's department. According to the information obtained through the State Board of Equalization, there are currently 16 businesses within the city limits licensed by the state to sell tobacco products. So that's kind of an overview, and at this time I'm going to ask Associate City Attorney Valerie Pistole to continue with this presentation, and she'll walk you through the specific changes to the ordinance provisions.
Thank you. What we've done is we've incorporated the comments that the council had taken a straw vote on last meeting in February, and we have incorporated the most expansive definition of electronic smoking devices as well as smoking and tobacco paraphernalia. It is a definition that does change as various other aspects are introduced, but this is the broadest definition to date and is quite current. We have omitted one provision for drug paraphernalia because we feel that under state law, a business license itself can be revoked should a retailer sell drug paraphernalia. We don't want to be in conflict with the state or be preempted. The tobacco retailer will have two licenses in essence from Sonoma. One is a business license and one is the specific tobacco retailer license. And should that retailer sell drug paraphernalia, it would be grounds to revoke his business license. So we feel that that is adequately covered. We are limiting or grandfathering in, is the common term used, the existing locations. And if, again, these particular locations, if they were not grandfathered in and the council chose to protect youth areas, then practically the entire city of Sonoma would not, there would not be a location available. I've been working with Mr. Goodison on this, and we don't think there are very many, if any, locations which would be permitted that are sufficiently far from a youth-oriented area, such as a park, school, playground, child care facility, this type of thing, where they would have more likely access to this product, these tobacco products. So we decided instead the council was interested in making sure that the existing businesses were allowed to continue in their current locations. We also incorporated a provision that would allow the existing retailers, assuming that they are not violating any of the requirements of the statute, they would be permitted to sell their license, their business to another person, as long as it's not trying to violate the provisions that provide if they have a certain number of penalties, they have their license suspended. And if they have 4 violations in a 60-month period, their license is revoked permanently. So the thinking is that we want to avoid them making a fraudulent or a not arm's length transaction to avoid this type of suspension or permanent revocation. We have not added any specific sign regulation. Again, we've been relying on the existing sign law in Sonoma, which Mr. Goodison can address if the council has further questions. But right now, the existing sign regulations would prohibit flashing signs and signs saying, "Come buy Camel cigarettes," or something of that sort. So the existing sign ordinance more than adequately covers that particular concern that the council expressed. We also have included a prohibition against selling flavored tobacco products. The American Lung Association is quite concerned that when you add cherry or strawberry or vanilla or chocolate to tobacco, it is more appealing to young people. We have, however, permitted flavors to be added to products which are marketed to adults. That is, they are in larger packs, cigars packaged in 5 or more packages, as well as single cigars, as long as the retail price is sufficiently high to discourage a young person from going in to buy one cigar that's cherry flavored or chocolate flavored or licorice flavored. That may have an adverse economic effect. I'm sorry? Okay. That may have an adverse economic effect on some retailers. So this is something, a policy decision that the council would need to address. We do have an exception, and that exception is these cigars that are in larger packs or have a higher retail price. And again, as the city manager has suggested, we are waiting to see how the state acts on the raising the age to 21. We could, under the auspices of a tobacco retail license, probably age for a person selling tobacco in Sonoma. We could not make it a crime for a 19-year-old to purchase tobacco. That would be preempted. However, again, I think that in view of the state legislation, we can always add the council could always consider adding this type of provision to the ordinance at a later time. And then lastly, we have omitted the provision allowing for an exception to the suspension of a license for a violation. It was one of the suggested plug-ins, if you will, is that there could have been a penalty of $1,000 and just a one-day suspension in the hopes that this would adequately discourage violations of the ordinance. That is the extent of the changes that were incorporated since the meeting on February 2nd.
Thank you, Valerie. Is there any questions for staff? Vice Mayor Gallion?
I just wanted to make this perfectly clear. Are samples allowed under any circumstances in this ordinance?
I don't believe cigarettes, of course, are covered by state law. There can be no sampling of cigarettes. This particular, we do not limit anything of sampling in this ordinance.
But, yes. Oh, was it?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay, so my only question would be, you know, we do have the provision for $3 to be able to do that. So say you were at an event and there was a vendor who was handing out cigars or something of that nature, how would that be handled?
Well, the vendor probably wouldn't be able to sell Sonoma unless he was at or she was at one of the locations that we've licensed them.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Hundley?
So going off of that, so giving out something for free would still be considered selling even if there wasn't a transaction?
I believe that if they were conducting free samples pursuant to their at their business location, that would be a violation.
And if a different company was having a party and it was like, you know, whiskey, cigar, excuse me, cigar party, and it was free there, like would that fall under this at all, or is that a separate thing?
That would not, the party I'm assuming is not at a retail location that has a license, so probably that would not be covered under this ordinance.
Okay, and the question that I had was, as far as for the flavored cigars, it's currently listed as more than 5, as opposed to 5 or more. Was there a reason why you picked more than 5 versus 5 or more?
I believe that the American Lung Association and the model ordinance has this suggested language, and that's why it was selected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Agramonte.
I hope I'm not being premature in asking this, but on page 28, TRL, issuance and monitoring, the first sentence of that paragraph, the ordinance will implement, not implements, I believe. So there's an error there. And then page 35, could you explain D to me?
My pagination, I'll check with the managers.
Oh, 7 or 35? I don't know. Right there. On which? D, positive identification required?
Yeah, that's on page 7.
I don't understand it, I'm sorry.
Current law requires that a positive identification be required before you can purchase tobacco, and this would be incorporated into our ordinance as well. So in order for a retailer to be in compliance with this, if the person attempting to purchase the tobacco appeared to be under 27, then they would have to first show a positive identification, a driver's license, or something showing the birth date, a passport.
Is there any other questions?
I have one more question.
Councilmember Hundley.
With regard to the sign regulations, I don't remember that coming up last time. Did that come up with the previous council? Talking about the blinking signs?
My notes reflect that there was a concern about signage, and that upon further research, it was really just a question. Does our sign ordinance cover this type of thing? And the model ordinance requires the enforcement officer to go out and measure whether 15% of the window is covered. However, the Sonoma ordinance approaches it in a different way and says that that is not any kind of a sign that, other than advertising the business itself, if they have a franchise or something along that lines, could be displayed.
So even under the model ordinance, they still allow shops to have advertisements to the public. I'm thinking specifically of the fact that we have shops that are really close to schools, and I know that bothers people. So as far as things that are on the public side, and whether there's regulations out there that prohibit that.
Well, our existing sign ordinance covers all signs in Sonoma, whether they're near schools or not, and they do provide for limits. I think Mr. Goodison perhaps can address the specifics of that sign ordinance.
Well, I think our existing sign ordinance is actually stronger, at least based on my impression, than the model ordinance, in that if you take, for example, there's a business called Cigarettes Cheaper located somewhere, and it's an established, authorized tobacco retailer. Well, they can have their sign that says Cigarettes Cheaper, but in their windows they can't have any signs that say Marlboro or Camel or identification of specific brands under our current sign regulations. So we believe that covers it better than the model ordinance.
Is there any other questions for staff? If not, I guess I have one. I wanted to go back to flavored tobacco. And I read the ordinance. I talked to the city manager today, and is that a flavored tobacco? As far as the audit, I'm showing you, it's Skoal, and it's wintergreen flavored.
Wintergreen would be a flavor. The only flavors that are accepted under the model ordinance are menthol and tobacco flavors.
Okay. So when we're talking about these I wanted to bring a little bit of props because Gary brought props the other day and they actually seem to work pretty good. I bought this today for 69 cents, and under the ordinance, and Rachel or Councilmember Hunley was talking about how the ordinance says over
5 or more, over 5.
Over 5. And I noticed that all the packages are 3 or 5. So I was just kind of wondering why it doesn't say 5 or more, because I think what this council is trying to do, if I have it right, is we're trying to not have minors buying tobacco or be attracted to tobacco. But in the ordinance, I think that we might have, with chewing tobacco, because if an individual over 18 years old wants to buy a 5-pack, he or she could buy this and take one and smoke it. But with chewing tobacco, if we take that out, that means that any chewing tobacco would be away from the ordinance, unless it was probably Copenhagen, or Kodiak, which doesn't have wintergreen. So it's wintergreen and mint are flavored tobaccos.
Yes, they are. And the other product that would be prohibited is pipe tobacco, because apparently pipe tobacco is also flavored. So unless you made an exception of you don't want to prohibit flavors in Skoal, or chewing tobacco, I should say, or pipe tobacco, they would be prohibited to be sold in Sonoma.
But we could change, in the ordinance, we could specify chewing tobacco, because chewing tobacco, isn't one of those that you buy, if you buy 5, I know they come in rolls, but I just want to make sure that we're not banning something that an individual cannot get
as an adult.
Where the swishers, I can see that, but with the chewing tobacco, I was a little concerned about that.
Mm-hmm. The current, the way the model ordinance is written, it is on the broad side, and it is prohibiting all flavored tobacco, pipe, chewing, in cigars, those 3 areas.
Councilmember Edwards.
So one of the things, Valerie, that we brought up last time were historic flavors.
Yes.
And so when I think of of, what's that one called? That's
Wintergreen.
So that's the wintergreen. So that's something that's been around for ever. Yeah. And in some of the finer cigars and things like that, and I would venture to say with pipe tobacco, I don't know anybody who smokes a pipe anymore, but it's, I think with some of the historic flavors, I think that might be the direction you're going.
Well, that's what I was finding out, just because I'm just concerned. I don't want minors to smoke or be able to buy tobacco products, but I really don't want to limit. I just don't want to limit people from having the right to do what they want.
So I would be open to considering that, but I'd like to hear from the public.
Yes,
as well. And just out of curiosity, what does a pack of that cost?
I bought that.
And maybe I know there's some retailers here that can probably tell.
I would say anywhere from $4 to $6, depending on where you shop.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hundley?
Just related to that, are you aware of anyone that has separated as far as flavors, like taking out chewing and pipe tobacco? Like if we did that, we'd be the first people to sort of divide our flavors.
As far as I know, there aren't a tremendous number of municipalities that have, other than Santa Clara and California, there are no other municipalities that I know of that have adopted the ban on flavored tobacco products, and they were across the board. Chicory, chocolate, licorice, those were included, but it was all flavored, was prohibited in Santa Clara. I don't know of any municipality that has done any mincing of that particular, meaning let's cover watermelon but not ever wintergreen.
And I guess the last question before we go out to public is, when you're taught, I didn't understand one thing in the ordinance, if you can just explain it. To roll your own, there was I guess there's a weight of, and is that, do you know where they come up with that weight? I was in a tobacco store today and I was trying to figure this out, where what that meant. I mean,
I'm afraid that I don't know where that came from. It came from the model ordinance, I know that, but I don't know how they arrived at that particular weight and action of rolling your own.
And I guess, and do we know where the County of Sonoma stands on their TRL?
They're still working on it.
Okay. At that point, if we don't have any more council questions, we're going to go ahead and open up this to public. And I asked you come up and spend 3 minutes, and please say your name and spell it and your address.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Jill Whittam, W-H-I-T-H-A-M, and I'm a 10-year resident of Sonoma. I'm also a 7-year survivor of stage 3 colon cancer and an American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network volunteer. My children grew up going to school here from kindergarten through high school. And I'm here to speak in favor of the most comprehensive tobacco retail licensing ordinance possible. Nearly 80% of smokers become addicted by the age of 18, before they're even old enough to legally purchase tobacco products. And the tobacco industry really seems to be unwilling to stop at anything in their attempts to addict new tobacco users. They seem to know, like us, that if people do not become addicted and do not start smoking by the age of 26, they're likely to never start. So this ordinance is really about protecting our youth. And if that infringes on an individual adult's freedoms, I hate to do that, but I think the goal really still needs to be protecting our youth at all costs. E-cigarettes are a very dangerous tobacco delivery device, and much of the U.S. citizens seem to consider them a safe alternative to cigarettes. But the truth is, these are not safe devices. Users inhale liquid nicotine and heavy metals and then exhale dangerous carcinogens into our environment. The smoke they exhale is secondhand smoke that innocent children and passersby can unknowingly inhale without their consent. E-cigarettes and the purity and amount of nicotine they contain is not regulated by the FDA. as are cigarettes and other tobacco products. So youth that are using e-cigarettes, they seem to be using e-cigarettes at an ever-increasing rate. And e-cigarette use among teens is now surpassing that of traditional cigarettes. In 2014, twice as many 8th and 10th graders actually reported using e-cigarettes versus those that use traditional cigarettes. As a result, there's countless jurisdictions across the country that have included e-cigarettes in their definition of tobacco. And we have spoken about this at previous council meetings, and I applaud you for including that. You did also touch on flavors of, historic flavors of chewing tobacco and other tobacco products, and I just want to mention that youth are still attracted to these historic flavors. There are children and young teens that are using chewing tobacco, so please consider carefully before excluding chewing tobacco from this ordinance. I think it's a concern. It may not have the same secondhand smoke, but it does not protect our children. So in conclusion, I'm asking that each of you protect the youth of Sonoma by passing the strongest possible tobacco retail license ordinance that the law will allow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And could I see a sign of hands of how many individuals are going to speak tonight? Thank you.
I didn't even see how many people there were. Good evening.
14.
Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Eric Beal, E-R-I-C-K, last name Beal, B as in boy, E-A-L-L. And I am the general manager of Digital Cigs in Santa Rosa. We are Northern California's largest and longest running vapor product retailer. I am not here from Big Tobacco or Big Pharma. I'm here to support vapor products and oppose the ordinance's inclusion of them. Combustible tobacco cigarettes were developed and aggressively marketed for non-smokers to become smokers. Vapor products were developed and are marketed for smokers to become non-smokers. There's a big difference there. I'm curious how you guys figured out how to define vapor products as tobacco products and turn vapor product merchants into tobacco retailers. I'm guessing it's because there's nicotine in, the nicotine that's in our vapor came from tobacco. Is that right?
Please address the mayor, and I'll have that question answered.
Okay. If that's the case, then every grocery store is selling tobacco byproducts because nicotine is naturally occurring in cauliflower, eggplant, tomato, potatoes, everything we eat. All right. Dr. Siegel from the Boston University of Public Health said vaping technology has the potential to be one of the greatest anti-smoking breakthroughs. I would hate to see its promise wasted because of misinformation by the very public health authorities who should be in the vanguard of reducing the harm from cigarettes. Dr. Newhouse, the director of Vanderbilt University's Center for Cognitive Medicine, who performed studies on the medicinal benefits of nicotine of Alzheimer's patients, states nicotine by itself is not addictive. It requires assistance from all the other chemicals found in tobacco products. His lab tests show that animals will not self-administer nicotine the same way they will with cocaine. Dr. Joel Nitzkin, a former co-chair of the Tobacco Control Task Force of the American Association of Public Health Physicians, said, "There is no public health justification for banning e-cigarette use in non-smoking areas. There is simply zero evidence that secondhand aerosols exhaled by e-cigarette users endanger non-users." Why have you and the anti-nicotine and tobacco zealots launched this blitzkrieg against us? We know that the real science stacks up. It's steadily demolishing the claims about the dangers of vaping. The supporting science and medical research is all here. So-called health officials in the American Lung Association stating that we just don't know if vaping is safer than smoking it's as intellectually respectable as claiming that the dinosaurs went extinct because Noah couldn't fit them onto the ark. That's how ridiculous that is. It's a cruel irony that this council, impassioned anti-smoking advocates, and Big Tobacco all share the same agenda of restricting access to products that unshackle smokers from their deadly habit. Vapor products need to be seen for what they are, the latest in cutting-edge technology tobacco harm reduction devices. If you are passionate about protecting public health and tobacco-related harm reduction, I urge you to amend this ordinance and remove the inclusion of vapor products. Thank you, Council, for considering my input, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you. And what I'll do is after public comment, I will be asking staff, and I'll ask them that question on the vapors. And I'll remind everyone 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. I am Michelle McGarry, MC capital Garry. I am the current chair of the Coalition for Tobacco-Free Sonoma County. And I thank you for your consideration and time on the issue of establishing a tobacco retailing license program. I'm here to encourage you and the council to move forward with a plan to establish a tobacco retailer program, as it is in many cases so far the first steps needed to protect young people from purchasing traditional and emerging tobacco products. Most recently, the California Department of Public Health circulated a health advisory, and I'm sure this is part of some material you received. The health advisory sought to inform healthcare professionals on the public health risk posed by marketing, sales, and use of electronic cigarettes, especially to children and young people. Another point addressed in this same health advisory is the National Youth Survey and the findings that use by high school age students tripled between 2011 and 2013. That's just 2 years. Triple. And many of the youth surveyed reported that they had never smoked traditional cigarettes. In addition, the state health officer's report on e-cigarettes labels the availability of e-cigarettes as a community health threat. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up by reminding the council that the Tobacco Coalition is made up of 23 agencies that are available to you, the council, to community members of the city of Sonoma, to roll out the tobacco retailers licensing program when the time comes. The Center for Wellbeing is poised to bring in trained lay health workers, promotoras de salud, and youth peer-to-peer educators to conduct educational presentations to support retail owners, community members, and to assist with a smooth transition at implementation. And I thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this? And as a reminder for some that haven't been here, that was only 2.5 minutes. You'll hear one beep, and then when you hear a series of beeps until we get our timer.
Hi there, my name is Kathy Clays, and I live on 779 Town Street, and that's spelt C-L-A-E-Y-S, and it's Kathy with a C. And I would love to see this tobacco license for retailers go in, because I think we have to do whatever we can take, whatever we can do to get any kind of tobacco type product or tobacco product out of the hands of young people. I unfortunately have had to raise my kids without 3 of their grandparents because of cigarettes, and so I think just whatever it takes, let's do it and let the evidence come forward and prove us wrong, great, but let's not take a chance that it's right and let these things go, just crazy like I think they already are going. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Name's Ed Kenny.
City Clerk.
Excuse me, Mayor. Some members in the audience are having a difficult time hearing. I don't know if we could have the sound system turned up a bit.
Wait a minute, that's me.
Could we get the microphone up a little bit? And usually we don't have a problem with Ed, so he might not be.
You don't need a microphone for me.
But
my name's Ed Kenny. I live on Arnold Drive.
Can everybody hear that in the back?
Can you hear? Good. I've been married for 61 years. I chewed tobacco until my wife told me to shut up and don't chew it anymore. She got pap test all her life, got boob test all her life, and you know what that is? You went to Balboa.
Look at the mayor, please.
Okay, and the last thing was that when she got her lungs tested, the doctor said she's as clean as a whistle. Guess what she died from? Alzheimer. So God bless you that you are survivors.
please address.
But it's a
the
good
mayor.
point, to, when you make your decision. You can kick the bucket for anything.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? And as a reminder, on some of these issues, I want to make sure everybody feels safe in the audience, so please just speak through the mayor, and if I have any city staff questions, I will direct staff.
Good evening. My name is Iqbal Lodi, IQBAL. Last name is Lodhi. I'm a franchisee for 7-Eleven in downtown. I've been in the system almost 30 years, and we are running our business as to be compliant of city ordinance, and we are responsible. We have our clerk make sure they check, they go through our procedures to complete that before they go on registers to selling to the minor, because we have to test to do that. I have a copy of those. Maybe if I could pass that to you guys.
If you just give it to the city clerk.
Okay. So that, and also we have our secret shoppers. They come in, and if we sell under 30, they give us red cards. And I have all these green cards because we always check that ID. We don't want to sell that to minors. I mean, we want to work with the community, and in all this, because this raising $240 extra license is going to cost on my financial, because it's California law. It's probably next year minimum wage is going to be $10, and all the raising up plus top of these, it's more license fees and all that. So please just yeah, we don't want to sell that to minor either, because we want to work with the community, and also that's all I think.
Thank you. And if you want to give that to the city clerk. Is there any other public comment?
How you doing, Mayor? My name is Mike Scott, M-I-K-E-S-C-O-T-T, and I'm actually with Corporate 7-Eleven, and I kind of wanted to talk to you guys a little bit today about the process that we have and the system set in place that we have to ensure that we are not selling to minors. And as Iqbal had said, we have letters from the city saying that we have not sold to minors because of the undercover decoys that come in as well, and we do a good job, and they take a lot of pride in what they do to make sure that they do help in the community. It all starts when we hire an employee. We have a computer-based training program that we make sure we ensure that every single staff member, before they even get on a register, understands what it means to sell to a minor, what they are looking for, and so that way we ensure that they are trained before they even start working. As they start working, we have a fail-safe set up in the system as well, that either they have to scan or slide the ID. And then we're already doing it, and we have been at 7-Eleven. If they look under 27, we're already carding no matter what. And that's something that we're doing. And that obviously goes to show, again, from the city saying that we've had 0 violations in both the 7-Elevens on Railroad and West Napa. And then really what I wanted to go over as well is we are working with cities like LA and some of the other cities that we're basically, what we're doing is we are so good at what we do and making sure we're not selling to minors. Are we going to make mistakes? Sure we are. But we have systems put in place, and so we're actually working with those cities right now to create these systems, the computer-based training programs for the cities to help with all the other local businesses to ensure they can have the same compliance as we do. So, and it really is, as Iqbal was saying, it really does, not only financial, they do a lot in the community, from fundraising pizza drives to a lot of things to ensure for little leagues, for churches, for all different types of things. And so as much as, a lot of folks don't want to sell to kids, either do we and either do the franchisees, and they really do their best not to. But it does have a financial impact on them. A financial impact, as we did the numbers of just a flavored, anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a year and up. And while they're conforming and following the compliances of the city, so it's kind of, why we want to have a socially responsible, we also are following the rules that are set in place. So,
yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And could public hear him through that? Okay, just checking the microphone. Is there any other public comment?
My name is Brent Louder. Last name is Lowder. Address is 300 Knoll Ridge Court.
I am with a statewide organization called RESOURCE, stands for Retailers, Store Owners United to Rebuild California's Economy. I'm here representing local retailers. If passed, this ordinance would severely impact local store owners, would put them at a significant disadvantage compared to store owners just outside the city boundaries. In particular, any ban on flavored tobacco products would drive customers to stores just outside the city and result in a significant loss of revenue for the local store owners in the community here and the local economy. We believe the council is obviously well-intentioned with considerations on this issue, and local retailers here share all the community concerns surrounding selling any tobacco products to minors at all. However, as has been alluded to this evening, the FDA records show City of Sonoma retailers in 2014 actually had a perfect compliance rate, a 100% compliance rate, which is something I think the whole community should be proud of, and certainly the retailers here are doing a terrific job. Most importantly, if this passes, it will not achieve the desired results. Minors' access to tobacco will remain illegal. However, adult customers will still have easy access to products and will simply seek them in stores just minutes away, just down the road. So the real loser of such an ordinance will be local retailers and the local economy, both who will be negatively impacted. So we urge the council to reject the adoption of these restrictions. I have here that I'll submit to the city clerk a letter from the Neighborhood and Market Association, which is an affiliate group, as well as one of our retailers, and a petition all in opposition to the ordinance. In summary, Sonoma retailers are strong members of the community. They contribute positively to the local economy, and they have earned the community's trust by being perfect stewards last year of all regulations surrounding this issue. So we ask the council to please protect local retailers and store owners by not giving retailers just outside the city a massive advantage over stores in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Elizabeth Emerson, and I'm a local resident working in the public health field. I just want to express my gratitude and commendation for all the hard work that's gone into what looks like a very progressive, comprehensive ordinance. The public health community feels that the $5 for the pack of for the cigars is actually more of a youth disincentive than the $3 in the Sonoma County is actually their proposed model ordinance is using $5 as their rate. So I don't think that anybody would be losing business since the county is contiguous to Sonoma. I want to address the electronic nicotine devices and the vape pens and so forth, which are the biggest concern. The scientists who were quoted tonight are not considered to be credible scientists in the public health community. The harm reduction idea around these kid-friendly products is really one of harm shifting. These are considered to be training wheels for regular tobacco use. And Dr. Ron Chapman, who is the state health officer, released a report last month saying that there are more youth buying these now than regular tobacco. The other thing I went to a local convenience store similar to the one mentioned tonight, and I asked for a vape pen. This looks like a regular pen. Some of these have the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes of nicotine. Parents and teachers don't know that when their kids have that in the mouth, that they're really getting addicted to nicotine by the hour. The clerk behind the counter offered me a variety of seemingly dozens of candy-flavored dessert flavors. They were all on the counter next to the door. They were not behind the counter. If he had to help a customer find a gallon of milk, any teenager could run with these and get out the door. In Marin County, when we had our, when the local communities passed the self-service merchandise components of these ordinances, some of the merchants told us that they actually saw an increase of 10 to 20% revenue because of the shoplifting factor. because that is how a lot of teens get these. It's a big challenge to see if you can get, you know, pick these up. I'm going to, since this is sort of a kind of a show and tell night, I'm going to just pass these around so you can see what these really look like.
You just give that to the city clerk.
I sure will. So I appreciate the public education, too, that comes with this ordinance process and this public hearing, because the public really doesn't understand what these are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Evening, Council. Ted Sexauer, S-E-X-A-U-E-R, 12 Hacienda Drive. I spoke, as you considered this matter the last time, about the positive reception of the CVS store for stopping the sales. And I just looked up an article in the Time magazine dated November 4th, 2014. And the headline is CVS revenues up after cigarette sales ban. I could read the rest of you, but I'll just leave it with that. You know, they're doing well because they made that positive move.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? And if I could get anybody else that's going to comment, please get to the back of the room with a couple, just so we can move along. Yes.
Okay, Mayor Cook and the rest of the council members. My name is Jay Macedo, M-A-C-E-D-O, and I'm with the Sonoma County Department of Health Services Tobacco Prevention Program. And I just wanted to come up here, I have before, and just remind the council and staff that and the community that we're here to help with any tobacco retailer licensing, implementation, any evaluation that you would like done around this kind of program, we can offer that. I wanted to also share a little bit of an update from the Sonoma County Tobacco Retail licensing program that we're working on right now. It's going to go before the council. Before the Board of Supervisors. It's going to have some very similar provisions that you all have, so there will be some continuity across jurisdiction boundaries. And so that'll happen on April 7th is right now when we're scheduled for our first reading. And I also wanted to mention that we have recently looked at some Stake Act data that is the sales to youth data. And in Sonoma County, in different jurisdictions, it ranges anywhere from 8% sales rate to 40% sales rate here in Sonoma County. And I will email the City of Sonoma's exact rate to the staff so that they will have that for your findings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Cook and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to talk tonight. My name is Lori Bremner, B-R-E-M-N-E-R. I live on Melody Lane. I've had a small business on the plaza for over 17 years. I'm really excited that we've gotten this far since Vice Mayor Gallion and I first spoke about this quite a few years ago, and I really appreciate all the time and effort of staff and the council to bring us to here. My dad died of emphysema before he met any of my 3 children. My own leukemia diagnosis as a young adult was likely a result of him being a smoker. Tobacco is the only product, when if used as directed, will kill you. Almost all smokers start before they're 18 years old, and once a young person is addicted, it is very, very hard to quit. We need to do all we can to prevent our youth from falling prey to the lure of nicotine addiction in all its forms. So some of this work has to happen at the federal level, and as a national board member of the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, we are working hard on that front. Some of this work has to happen at the state level, and as the chair of the American Cancer Society California Division Board of Directors, we're also working hard at that level. However, if you want Sonoma to not sell tobacco to people under 21, I wouldn't wait on the state, because as you know, the tobacco companies have a stranglehold on Sacramento. So it's really hard to pass anything meaningful tobacco related in Sacramento. But much of the most impactful work that can be done in tobacco control is done at the local level. city by city, county by county. Tobacco retail licensing ordinances is a very, very powerful way for our local governments to protect public health, and it's been proven in cities all over the country, over 100 in California alone. The draft ordinance is very good, and I appreciate all the time you spent on it, but I took some photos today to demonstrate where it could really be stronger. This is the front of the Easy Stop, directly across the street from the high school. When a high school kid crosses the street at lunch to get a soda, as the boy walking out did, he sees 7 ads on the way into the store for cigarettes and e-cigarettes on the outside of the store. If this is in compliance with Sonoma's sign ordinance, then I don't think it's adequate. If you look at picture number 2, when an Adele Harrison middle school kid stops for ice cream on the way home, the ice cream is right in front of the tobacco display. They see 5 separate displays for electronic smoking devices, colorful little bottles of flavored nicotine liquid, and a case of individual cigars. I don't know the price of those cigars, but I'm hoping that we can set $5 as the limit rather than $3 to match the county ordinance. In my opinion, this store does not deserve to be grandfathered. This is blatant marketing to children directly across from the high school, directly across from the middle school, and I don't think they deserve grandfathering. They certainly don't deserve to transfer their license if you can't see it to not grandfather them. The next pictures are at the Shell station on Broadway. You'll see there's also snus advertised there, which comes in a little tic-tac pocket. It's flavored, powdered tobacco that kids love. So I really hope that you will do everything you can to make a strong ordinance tonight, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Pam Granger with the American Lung Association. I'm really enthused on behalf of our organization about your considering one of the very best techniques to reduce smoking and use of tobacco products altogether, and that's to have people not start in the first place. So as Lori just mentioned, tobacco retailer licenses are a proven strategy to reduce youth uptake in the first place. The County of Sonoma, and most of you have sort of embraced the idea of the Portrait of Sonoma County, and one of the population-based suggestions that was made, again, to reduce the smoking rate of the county was to reduce the smoking rate to improve public health, and tobacco retail licenses are quite big. As a matter of fact, Mr. Macedo from the health department didn't remember to mention that he just made a presentation to mayors and councils meeting, and there are at least 6 other jurisdictions in Sonoma County that are interested in taking a look at tobacco retailer licensing, which will certainly level the playing field all the way around. Mr. Beal asked why electronic cigarettes are considered tobacco products. In 2010, the U.S. Court of Appeal determined that e-cigs should be regulated as tobacco products, except for when they're making a therapeutic quit smoking claim, and none of them have been authorized to do so. The electronic cigarettes companies sued the FDA to be regulated as tobacco products as opposed to drug delivery devices. The nicotine used in electronic cigarettes is derived from tobacco. Electronic cigarette marketing mirrors that of traditional tobacco companies a good deal because they have joined the industry. And the FDA, just as a reminder, has not found e-cigs to be safe or effective in marketing for people to quit. So thank you very much for looking at a policy that would have an annual fee on tobacco retailers, that would have the fee be just enough to support education and compliance so that those who are doing well can continue to do well, that has fines sufficient to be a deterrent and could revoke or suspend in case of extreme violations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion and action. Is there any discussion from? Councilmember Agramonte.
Well, I was fortunate enough today to attend the Health Action Committee, and this actually, this issue was discussed, and also Jay Macedo was there as well, and giving us information. So I just have one question, Mr. Mayor, on it's page 15 or 43, fee for license, and I know there's a certain monetary value and for the fee, and then I know the county might be very different. But my question is, I think Mr. Macedo said that he's, I guess, whomever has worked with the city of Sonoma to help with this ordinance. And my question is, he has suggested, it says here the department, I assume that's possibly the police department. I think that's what I'm seeing somewhere in here, would be monitoring this. But I believe Mr. Macedo said that they would help with that as well. So I don't know exactly, I don't know if he could come back and answer that question for us or whatever. Or
if he would like to come back and answer that question, yes.
Just for clarification, the term department is defined as the city manager or her designee.
All right. Thanks. Thank you.
So one of the items that we could help with as the Department of Health Services is we could help with compliance checks, we could help with merchant education, and we help serve as the backbone agency for the Coalition for a Tobacco-Free Sonoma County, which includes the Center for Wellbeing, American Lung Association, and other partners that could also help put the information out to the public and to educate merchants. And if there were compliance checks, because we would be doing them in the unincorporated, if ours passes, then we could also do that for other jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you. And then we did have a question from the public. Well, if I could get legal, I have we had a question from the public regarding vapors and the nicotine deriving from that. Are you prepared to answer that question? On vapors, what the amount of nicotine, why vapors would be in the ordinance?
The vapors are in the ordinance for several reasons. The primary reason is the difficulty of actually conducting a scientific test when you're doing an enforcement. When you see someone who is selling this type of product, it's very difficult to actually do a test to determine whether or not it contains nicotine. Under our ordinance, we have, and this issue comes up in retailing, the definition of electronic cigarettes is in the definitional section. And it does deal with an inhaled dose of nicotine or other substances, including any component part of such a device, whether or not sold separately. So it is nicotine or other substances which is delivered through this electronic device. It's very difficult unless you have a lab to actually to test what amount of nicotine, if any, is in it.
Thank you. Is there any other, Vice Mayor Gallion?
Well, I think it just comes down to, in my mind, the chewing tobacco issue. I think we have the cigars, the 5. Are we doing 5 or more? Are we doing more than 5 as far as verbiage is concerned? I also wanted to know in identification, the method of identification, you know, we've heard that certain vendors are doing that as well. But are we actually asking for a photo ID identification in there? And is that something that we could make sure that that is happening? Because we have tourists.
Under the ordinance, we are requiring positive identification that is at least the minimum age that the person under state law is required to have before they can purchase tobacco. So it is the same language that the state uses with respect to identification required for cigarettes. That's where we've taken that language. I believe that it requires a birth date, but I don't think specifically, I don't know whether it requires anything beyond a birth date and perhaps a photograph, but it doesn't require specifically a photograph.
Okay, and so you can see therein lies my question, because if there is a piece of paper without a photo ID on it, it is not as secure as having a photo ID. But I just wanted to bring that up. okay? Maybe my other council members want to weigh in on that as well. So those are the things that have been running through my mind. And in tobacco products, I think we have sufficiently identified the description of the tobacco products. I know that sometimes they are indicating that you know, a percentage of tobacco in an item or not. I don't think we have to go down that line at all. I think we are actually just including all of them without having a percentage of tobacco in them. And that was another question that was raised. The last thing I will have, I'm sorry, I just have a few things here, is that we have 2 vendors, I believe, who are no longer selling cigarettes. And I'm not quite sure what we would be doing in that instance. In other words, they no longer are selling cigarettes. And what would we be doing? I mean, would we be giving them still an annual license? Would they still be filling it out? What do you think is a path of action?
What I could recommend in that, basically we follow the State Board of Equalizations and who's licensed under SBOE. What you have in your packet is the license form that they will have to fill out every year. And that is that form can't be revised by staff to include a separate section that they could fill out that says they are not subject to the provisions of this ordinance because they do not engage in sale of tobacco products to become subject to this ordinance. We could modify the form to include that section, and they would sign it and date it and countersigned by the city manager. They would have to file that every year, and then we would do a random inspection to make sure that they indeed are not selling products. That way, and CVS says that they are are not selling tobacco products, yet they're maintaining their license under SBOE. At least at this time, they're still listed as being licensed to maintain and sell tobacco products. And for any other that's listed by SBOE currently, if another business were to sign that same affidavit and said they're not selling it, and we inspect and they aren't truly selling it, they could also sign that waiver at the bottom. But if they were to sell their business, and then the next person that bought that business at that same location and were eligible, they would then immediately become subject to the TRL license. That might be a path that we could go down, but I don't think that you would exempt anybody. They would still have to go through the process.
And to piggyback on those comments, the tobacco retail license at the existing locations, which were did include CVS, I believe, if they suspend tobacco retailing for more than 60 days, they would not be eligible to transfer a license for that location. So that would be a limitation. In fact, any location, if any existing location stops retailing for 60 days, then they would not be eligible for transferring that license location.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Is CVS's address in this Board of Equalization list?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion or possible action? Councilmember Edwards.
Question for you, David. On the sign issue on the document that was passed out.
That's an enforcement issue.
Just basically an enforcement issue. And then on page number 2, if the rest of the council wants to, or let's see, I'm sorry, page 3. No, I lost my spot. Actually, the last page. It's interesting with our representative from the health department's here. There's a sign right in the middle of it stating this facility is inspected by the health department. I just find that ironic in the in this photo. So since our last meeting, I've done a little research, mainly around the high school, with just asking different baseball players and so on. And he says, you know, what's the best thing about the school? And of course, they all say baseball. And what's the worst thing is that, and they basically say everybody's vaping. And when I saw that, I've never seen one of those little pens that somebody had. They say that it's pervasive in the school now. And then with our own school, which is at the community center, and everybody sees me around town all the time in my white van. There's a small group of kids from one of the schools down there that walks down to one of the convenience stores, and they're always back, and they're always smoking. It's very interesting because I see them early, and then I see them on their way back, and I don't know if they're shoplifting them or they're buying them or what they're doing, but it's pretty disturbing. And I lost my father to emphysema, and I've never smoked, and so it's something that when we talk about losing revenue and so on, all the bars in Ireland stopped having smoking as well, and you know, I think that's been a really good start. I'm a little distressed at looking at these. I don't ever go into a gas station to buy really anything, but except the car wash from Miguel over there. But it's pretty disturbing to see what the representation we have here, and it's clearly you know, pointed right at kids, and the flavors. You know, I know a lot of farmers that have a roll of Copenhagen in their back pocket or in the seat of their car, and it's not a habit that I enjoy or like, or actually, I don't mind being around people who have it, but it clearly has its issues with baseball. And the amount of cancers, lip cancers, and oral cancers that have happened to major league players and otherwise. But this issue about if they weren't intended to be cigarettes, they wouldn't call them e-cigs, in my opinion. But I find it's just something, it makes people feel cool at the school level, and I think it's, just from what I witness with people that work in our warehouse and things like that, they're claiming they're stopping smoking, but they're blowing all kinds of other flavors around. We make everybody go outside, but it's very pervasive, not just in the young kids, but in the older as well. And I just don't like the seeing it. But then when I see some of these photos, it's amazing with the pitch. I understand from reading about this. The business is growing rapidly, and it's become a very, very industrious business. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I like the straw poll and the discussion through the council before a motion. So I think everyone spoke. So I'll go ahead and speak. Oh, do you want to speak before me?
Well, you said everyone spoke. I haven't spoken.
Okay. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, sure.
Councilmember Hundley.
So the two interests that I'm thinking about here is, on the one side, we came to do this because we are concerned about reaching kids before they start smoking, because that's what a lot of people do. And I find protecting kids to be a compelling interest because they're not mature enough to really make decisions about any sort of habit-forming activity that later in life it's going to be more difficult to walk away from. But then on the other side, we have our businesses here who have their own interest, and that also includes, by business interest, I mean people who have probably invested their entire life savings into a business, built a model on selling something that was perfectly legal at the time when they started. It's still legal now for adults. So for me, drawing the line is finding out, what is bringing kids in, and then what are the products that are left that consenting, responsible adults can still legally buy, and that these stores that rely on them, not just the sales of them, but also recognizing that people, pop in to buy something and they end up picking a few more things. And that's really what the business model built on. So when it comes to something like e-cigarettes, which is something that's still relatively new. For me, that means that, except for stores that are completely dedicated to selling them, there's still a smaller part of these business offerings, and just the way that they're marketed, the flavors, the fact that they are pervasive in the high schools. I hear it from parents all the time. That's something that I am definitely interested in keeping out of Sonoma and away from the kids. As far as what you brought up earlier about the flavors and whether we could draw a line for some of the products that are more geared towards adults or just more interesting to adults, I would definitely consider talking about that, because I'm not here today to keep all adults in Sonoma from smoking. I'm just here to protect the kids, and for the people who have the businesses here, if there's a way that we could allow them to still sell legal product that is not as attractive to kids, then I would be in support of that.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunley. Now that everybody has spoken, I will speak. I agree with one thing that was said earlier. I don't like the language in the 5 or more, so I know that I won't be supporting that because it doesn't make sense because there are 5 packs. And I do like what Councilmember Edwards was saying about historic flavors. I am concerned about chewing tobacco with wintergreen, and there's a great flavor. I understand, but I would say that those are geared to adults also. And like what Councilmember Hunley said, it is true, this all started because we don't want kids to smoke, and we need to make sure that we have a retail license. Because I've seen the studies. Enforcement is not happening. Yes, we can say that everybody's passing with flying colors, but that's because there's not a lot of enforcement. And I sit up here and I plead and I beg all the time, I will not pass an ordinance that we don't enforce. I don't need an A from the American Cancer Society. People have told me that, yeah, the council's just doing this because they don't like the F that we received. No, I don't care if we have an A, B, C, D, or an F. I don't want our children in Sonoma being able to buy cigarettes. And I think having a retail license makes sense, because all we do is we take that money and that pays for the sting. And I'm a businessman, 246, don't quote me, the 246 is a small price to pay, and I am all for that. But where I do have the problem, and it's with vapors. I don't like vapors. They are geared to children. And I've gotten some emails from people who have said that they want to quit smoking. And I feel bad, believe me, because I want any adult to quit smoking that could. But vapors, selling vapors, it's a kid thing. And as I go around the high school, today I visited almost every place that sells tobacco today, and talked to some really wonderful people, and these are members of our community. And I told everybody that I saw come here and speak. I want them to feel comfortable in these chambers, because they are business people who pay their taxes that help everything we have here in Sonoma. So I don't want to sit up here and make them be the devils that they aren't. You know, they're business people who bought businesses, and it's part of their business model. I think that we can restrict, but within reason. When we start banning Skoal that's over there, wintergreen flavor, and knowing that somebody can just drive 3 blocks and go get it, and now we're sending a message to the county, do what we're doing, because I want the county to pass this soon as we do. But I don't want somebody to have to drive to, somebody who fought for our country, I don't want them to have to drive to San Francisco or Nevada to purchase that product or buy it on the black market. This is where we have to be very careful. The last thing that I'll say, and then I'll summarize, is use it or lose it. I don't want CVS sitting around saying that they don't sell tobacco, but still obtain a retail tobacco license from the city of Sonoma. I'm a common sense person, so I would say that there has to be something in the ordinance that we go to all the 16, because I know that there's another one on that list that doesn't sell cigarettes, won't mention their name, but I went in there to try to purchase cigarettes because I was curious, and they said they were no longer selling cigarettes. But I think that in the ordinance, and we need to talk about timing, what I would like to see is where we go to the businesses like CVS and say, are you going to sell cigarettes in Sonoma? And if they say no, they don't, then there's 15. If we go to a bar and they say that they're not going to sell them, and I don't know the language because, you know, I guess that if a bar wants to sell 1 pack of cigarettes, that would make sense. But I just don't want to send a message out that CVS quit selling cigarettes and have them come back in 5 or 6 years and sell the business.
Through the mayor. The one thing I'm thinking that CVS may be wanting to hold on to is the opportunity to sell prescription-based delivery devices, and that may, somebody could check with CVS on that, and that would be the only thinking that.
With Nicorette gum? But
no, with a similar device for the, you know, for the feel and everything else. That, I mean, I have no idea, but I would guess that that's probably where they're coming from as a company.
Yeah, so I'd like to find that out. So I guess, so my council kind of knows where I'm heading from. I would like to move this ordinance forward, but I would like to change the language a little bit and give direction back, or give direction back to staff to look at the 5 or more on the cigars. I'm okay with the cigars over 3 because you can still buy a pack of 5. Look at the historic flavors, maybe come up with a list of what historic flavors may be. But these are just in approval of the council. And then a total ban on vapors.
Could we have direction on the traditional flavors? I don't know what that means. Is there a site on Google that would give us the traditional flavors? It would be very helpful if we could find out what that means.
Well, I could start because I would, well.
I was going to say, because last meeting I was doing some of that work, and there's some historic flavors in cigars and that, you know, traditional flavors from, you know, I don't know exactly what they are. I don't remember.
And they're easy to ascertain?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Councilmember Hundley?
Yeah. I think that I would rather see the line just really clear, like if we're going to take pipe tobacco off the list, because I mean that probably has like tons of different flavors in it that probably it's a mixture of flavors that come up with whether their, you know, distinct blend is, or whether yeah, even if, you know, if you want to throw in, you know, mint flavors, but anything beyond that, it just seems like it'd be an exhaustive list, and whoever's ordering them at the store is going to have to like cross-reference, like, is this flavor? So I think it should either be like categorical or like a price thing, like with the cigars, there's either a quantity or a price. So it's like no one's actually looking at individual flavors. I don't know why menthol snuck through. Why did menthol get on there? So if there was a cleaner way to just distinguish that, I mean, I guess you can take a stab at coming up with a list, but it just seems like that would be really tedious for a lot of people.
Councilmember Agramonte?
And I may be heading down the wrong trail, but obviously this is possibly a very important ordinance, and I hear different opinions. So possibly could we break some of these things down and we can vote separately on those things, so the ordinance itself doesn't lose its impact. If there's 3 if somebody wants to vote and says that, well, I think they call them cigarillos or something, 3 and not a thing of 5 or whatever they're called. I've never smoked. If we were talking about Cheetos and hot dogs, I tell you, I would be an expert. Really. This is I never understood smoking, but do you understand what I'm saying, City Manager, that if we could just have that ordinance there are categories that people don't agree with, and then just categorize them, and that's done. where they might be able to break it down. I don't even know if that's possible.
It's not. It's an all or nothing proposition. So I would recommend that we do some straw voting again.
Yeah.
We're narrowing the issues down each time it's brought back. I don't see it being introduced tonight, to be honest with you. I hear too many disparate comments about various issues. So let's do some straw voting again. Let's talk about the cigar pack. Is it 5 or more than 5?
I'll start
with that.
Single
a cigar $3 or $5? Are we going to list acceptable flavors?
So I'm going to go ahead and just start.
So which ones?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just start on this side to do a straw vote, and I'll make sure I mix through so nobody feels I'm picking on them. Doing a straw vote on the 5 or more. On the cigarillos.
I say 5 or more.
Okay. Rachel?
I'm fine with 5 or more. I got an email from a retail store who had suggested 5 or more rather than more than 5 because I guess 5 is a popular item. So if that's something that's good with everybody, good with me.
Vice Mayor Gallion?
5 or more is good with me.
And Edwards also. Starting with Rachel. Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess we're talking about vapors. Are you?
Are we? So we're doing a complete ban of vapors?
Yes.
I support that.
And I would also support banning vapors.
Definitely prohibiting vapors.
Councilmember Edwards. And Edwards was an aye, and Agramonte.
Yes. Right.
I guess it's my turn on historic flavors. I guess the question that I'm going to ask is, does anybody want to just omit chewing tobacco? And then we would talk about omitting pipe tobacco. So meaning that anything could be sold to somebody over 18 with any flavors, because it seems like the chewing and the pipe are traditional flavors.
Isn't the overall issue selling any product to young people, to children?
I think that was the intent of the council.
Okay, so it does. I mean, for me, I'd say no. I wouldn't want any of those products sold.
Okay.
And I have to assume that, you know, as we've had, I think Iqbal spoke. Oh, sorry. He came up and spoke, feels that he's a responsible owner. He takes great care in checking IDs, and his staff as well. And the gentleman from corporate 7-Eleven was very convincing. So, you know, that's their job to do that. And I feel confident in just, I would say that.
On chewing tobacco, to not have it part of the ban, it would mean that they could sell chewing tobacco, is what the straw poll is now.
Is there
flavored or?
But is there an age level for those?
Yes, there is, at age 18.
Yeah,
yes.
then I would say that's fine. If they're doing their job, that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay. Councilmember Hunley.
Unless I hear from parents that have a concern that this is something that their kids are getting a hold of, it seems like kids have moved on, but I don't know. Right now, it seems like I would be fine with not having a flavor restriction on chewing tobacco.
And I also think that to take chewing tobacco out of the ordinance due to the historic flavors.
Flavored, you're speaking of flavored chewing tobacco.
Yeah,
as
flavored.
An exception.
Well, actually, what that would mean is that chewing tobacco is not part of the ordinance.
Oh, wait, no, I didn't agree to that. I'm just saying that I'm not going to ban flavored chewing tobacco, but it's still controlled by the...
Oh, it's still controlled by it.
Being under the ordinance means that it can only be sold at a licensed place.
Well, yes. I mean, of course.
Well, the way the ordinance is written now that we're discussing, the ordinance says no tobacco retailer shall sell any tobacco product containing a flavor. So, and the exception was cigars, a single cigar that exceeds $3. That's one issue that the council may want to discuss, or products containing more than 5 cigars. They could be any kind of flavors.
And then we would add in chewing tobacco.
And so now you're voting on whether you want to make chewing tobacco an exception, allowing chewing tobacco to be sold with flavors.
Correct. That's what the straw vote so far, and it's 3. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I do not like the chewing tobacco flavored period because it is a big attraction for kids. It is a major attraction for kids. Anyone who's playing sports or whatever, this is the big thing. And if you don't believe me, you can go to, you know, any opening camp or opening day and you can see just about any kid, you know, take out the wad and want to be participating in that particular avenue. And sometimes that is the worst type of oral cancer that has ever happened. I am against it altogether, chewing tobacco. And I may be in the minority, but I want to go down as saying I do not want it. And if it's sold in packages of 5 or whatever, in a regular tobacco flavor, then, you know, it could be packaged like cigars if you wanted to do it for adults. So that might be my recommendation of going around it.
Councilmember Edwards, and then we will come back to that.
So I'm having a look at this can, and it doesn't really say what's in it besides American-grown tobacco. It says smoking tobacco is addictive. It says, warning, this product can cause mouth cancer, but it doesn't say if it's what wintergreen is, where it comes from, if it's natural, if it's... I don't think you can grow wintergreen tobacco.
Probably wintergreen, number 7.
So my point is it something where, because this is something that, you know, I know has been around at least 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, something like that. When you talk about traditional flavors, and maybe I'm hearing a couple of council members going towards the flavor issue, but maybe it's natural flavors. Because I'll bet a lot of these things in this photo are made in a lab. The photo we have of all the tobacco products. I mean, these are just concoctions that are...
Councilmember Hunley?
I mean, what about if the things that we don't want are things that are, you know, fruit flavored and dessert flavored? What if we just said no fruit flavors and no dessert flavors, and that would sort of leave those flavors?
Yeah, and since we're doing a straw poll, and I'm the one on the flavored, I think that wintergreen had the problem. I actually went to a couple stores today, and I think wintergreen is the one that you would be banning Skoal, which I think Skoal only comes in wintergreen. But then I saw that there was a grape flavor. I don't know if anybody. I just don't know who
That's
chooses that.
clearly directed at kids.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I have no idea. I think that. So that's where I was trying to make it easier for our businesses to know what they can carry and what they can't. And since we're doing the straw poll, Lori was talking about. It really doesn't. It comes in a package of 5, but because of the price, it's usually like $30 for what they call a log of Skoal. And I would assume that the reason I was trying to take the flavored out of there is because, to me, and just doing the straw poll, is I really felt that we would be banning something that would probably hurt over 18-year-olds when we're trying not to have kids. But that's just me.
But there still is a limitation on age for this. Am I hearing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I think.
And I think there's only a few, I don't want to put any of the, but do you know how many products there are, flavored products in chewing tobacco?
For just chewing tobacco?
If you could come up to the mic. I think it warrants,
Yeah,
and we don't take public as a scientific answer, so I have to let the council know that it's your opinion.
For just chewing, or just the chewing tobacco, how many different flavors there are?
Yes.
Maybe 5, maybe 6. It's not raspberry fruit. There's not, 30 different flavors like there is with the vaping.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if council wants to do a straw poll again on chewing tobacco.
I'd like to make sure, based on a comment that Councilman Agramonte had, this ban on flavored tobacco products would apply regardless of your age. The only exception would be cigars over $3 and packs of more than 5. So those are the 2 exceptions that I have that has been incorporated into this ordinance. And one other correction, I wanted to make sure, it's slightly off the subject, but the revised ordinance has excluded as a possible location CVS because as of February 1st, when the council last considered this, they were not selling tobacco. So there are only 15 existing locations.
Councilmember Edwards, did you have a question? Okay. So maybe let's just go back and do that straw poll really quick with chewing tobacco. What? Yes. Yes, thank you. Councilmember Edwards, chewing. Okay. Well, yeah, we're trying to do the straw poll.
Gotcha.
And
So-
Councilmember Hunley did not want to go first.
So Valerie, so what you're saying is that the 5-pack, so if we can have flavors, so if somebody's buying this in a 5 or 6-pack, the retailer can sell the flavors, correct? We could do that.
So we could do that. We would have to add that to the ordinance. It is currently not in the ordinance.
But mostly it would be the people that I know that chew tobacco would buy a whole deal
Log.
of it anyway and sell it in a, and I'm not sure. I don't know.
Since I'm a farmer and I know a lot of chewers, no, most people buy them single. Some people buy them logs, but.
So if it was I mean, I think I know where you're going with this because being in the farming industry, we all know a lot of people who chew tobacco. And, you know, not that I condone it or anything else, but it's something that they're just going to go down the block and buy it. So is it something where you tie it in where it's a minimum purchase? If these were $3.29 or $3.89?
And that's probably why we're doing the straw poll. So probably as we go through, we would discuss that because Vice Mayor Gallion brought that up also.
Okay, all right.
So Vice Mayor Gallion, doing a straw poll on just,
Well,
you said it once, but I'm not going to say it for you.
all right, well, I'm just going to talk flavored tobacco products. I like what's in the ordinance right now.
And I would say that I would continue on omitting chewing tobacco as part of the flavored.
So now we're back to a complete ban of flavored chewing tobacco?
We're talking about if, well, or you can say that you
Or
would,
are we doing quantities?
or you could say quantities. I'm against quantities, so I didn't say it. But if you wanted, we are talking quantities, or if you want to continue the ban.
You didn't give me that option.
Oh, I thought I did. Okay,
you
we're going to go
told
back
me.
to Vice Mayor Gallion.
All right. Rachel, you will get there, okay? I liked my original statement if it was in quantities of 5, okay, for the chewing tobacco. That's probably more of an adult choice than it would ever be a children's choice, but, you know, people could band together. So I just want to say that I would be more likely to see it in a log of 5 for chewing tobacco. And I still want to stay with the description as we have it in the ordinance for flavored tobacco products.
I agree with Vice Mayor Gallion's reasoning about the quantity, but I'd want it to be a quantity that actually comes in. Like, I don't know how it's sold, but whatever pack, larger pack that's a higher price point.
If you could come up to the microphone.
No problem. If you guys have
And I do want to remind council, this is not a scientific, this is an opinion of a public.
It comes in 5s.
Okay.
And so otherwise it's sold individually. So to make a 3-pack or something else would be a whole nother packaging, a whole nother ordeal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think the same way we're doing it with the cigars. Packs of 5 are a way that it's an investment that's higher than a kid would usually afford, and it still allows a product to our businesses that they can sell, and I guess our residents if they want to consume it.
Okay. Councilmember Agarmate.
I still think we should be talking about Cheetos, but that's okay.
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I agree with Vice Mayor Gallion. Thank you.
Okay. And just for I mean, we could go along with that language. We have 3 votes up here. I don't think it wouldn't be a deal killer for me if it was in there, because it might stop kids from, but.
We are making an exception and permitting retailers to sell chewing tobacco in packs of 5 or more that are flavored.
That are flavored, yes.
Got it.
And then I think that the last straw poll is vapors.
We did that.
We went through, okay.
We're fine.
Okay. So, does city staff need any more direction?
We do. How about smoking pipe?
Flavor. Now we're talking about flavored pipe tobacco.
Yes.
And do you want to start at Councilmember Edwards, or would you rather?
No, that's fine. I mean, I don't, like I say, I don't know anybody who smokes a pipe. People buy bags of organic tobacco. You know, I don't see Dr. Pepper flavored pipe tobacco. So I would move along with the same issue with the chewing tobacco with pipe tobacco. I mean, I literally don't know anyone who smokes a pipe.
So you're saying ban it?
Pardon me? No. No, and what I'm saying is that, I mean, pipe tobacco is, I don't know how many kids are walking in the store and says, you know, give me buying a pipe and buying, you know, pipe tobacco.
So you would admit it, omit it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it may be another delivery device when they buy the zigzags and, you know, and making your, I have no idea. But.
Vice Mayor Gallion?
Well, I think our attorney wishes to
Oh.
Well, it's just for clarification that Councilmember Edwards, are you suggesting then that pipe tobacco of any flavor would be sellable to any person over 18?
Yeah.
Okay. Straw vote for that, Mr. Mayor?
Another point of clarification, apparently virtually all pipe tobacco is flavored. And so just that is according to some correspondence I received from the industry.
Well, good, thank you. And Vice Mayor Gallion?
I believe our unofficial expert in the audience.
You know, I think we're fine. I think we're fine now. Because this will be coming back to council as direction, so we can find out some of these questions.
So pipe tobacco is flavored. I don't see this as a youthful issue. I think I'm siding with Councilmember Edwards on this, so I would go ahead and vote in that direction.
And I'm with Vice Mayor Gallion and Councilmember Edwards. Councilmember Hundley.
I also agree with that.
Councilmember Agramonte?
I also.
Okay. Is that all the direction?
What about the price of a single cigar that would be flavored, $3 versus $5?
Okay. Councilmember Edwards?
I would say the $3 I think is enough of a range to get started. I mean, I'd be okay with 5 as well, but.
Council or Vice Mayor Gallion?
I'm looking for 5.
Okay. I went to $5. I went around, looked at them. Cigarillos, you can buy them single for 69 cents. I think the $3 is probably high enough, but I would say that the $5 would not be a deal killer for me.
Yeah, I just don't really know like what $3 buys you and what $5 buys you. I'm okay with 5, but since I don't actually know what the price point is, it's...
If I can help you, one thing that I went and saw today is if you look at most of the places where they just grab cigarillo for 69 cents, or you can go over for about $3 or $4 and buy the pack, and 5 because of the 5 or more. So those are probably a lot higher, and we could always ask for we could always ask direction through the straw poll of a little bit more clarification on what that buys you in Sonoma. Is that what you are saying?
Yeah, I guess next time, maybe I'll also sort of look into it, and I'd be fine with 3 or 5 at this point, I think.
5.
Okay. Does that give you direction? We had,
It sounds like $5 or more information.
well, I think,
Or at least $4.
Maybe $4.
I think we would like a little information because I really didn't see anything between, seriously, I didn't see anything between 3 and $5. It all looked like it was 69 cents, or then you get up into the $6 cigars. But maybe direction back to see what that buys you in a single cigar.
All right. And then in view of these particular changes on flavored tobacco products, does the council wish to address historic or traditional flavors as exceptions? Or is the council satisfied that these parameters are sufficient to protect
Well, I'll
minors?
start that one off and say that to me now it does not really matter because we've taken out what I feel would be the language that it wouldn't matter at this point for me. Councilmember Hundley?
I agree.
Agamonte? Edwards?
I'll go with that.
Okay. Do you have any other?
The only other thing was a question about what identification is required to be shown, whether it needs to be a photograph. I don't know what other forms of identification don't have a photograph.
Councilmember
That might need
Edwards?
more
I
research.
would like anybody who flies from a little kid to anyone else as state-issued ID.
State-issued ID?
If it's your JC card or anything that has your photo.
Vice Mayor
Photo ID is
Gallion?
fine.
I'm in support of it being a photo ID and state as well.
And I agree with going by state guidelines.
Photo ID sounds good. What about people who do not live here and do not have our state-issued IDs?
They have their own state's issued ID.
So some sort of government-issued ID?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah, I think.
I agree with everyone.
Okay. And let me ask the council, is there any other direction that you would like to ask city staff? I mean, for this, and does city staff have anything left for us? And then, just for public, before we,
One other thing.
Vice Mayor Gallion?
Just a point of clarification on the tobacco retailer license application. So we don't need any exception to this for someone who's not selling. Okay, all right, that's great. That's all I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, could you repeat that? Because that was one of my, concerns. It's use it or lose it?
Basically, because there's a 60-day provision already in the ordinance that if they don't have their license and it goes dormant for 60 days, then it can't be renewed anyway.
Okay. Okay, with that, I guess we have direction, and if probably to do this proper, I'll go ahead and call for a roll call vote, but should I have, no?
Yeah.
Just,
No.
that's enough, okay.
It'll come back with the revisions reflecting the straw votes.
Okay. And at that, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and open up the City Council meeting again. And now we are on item 6B, which is discussion, consideration, and possible action on the review and adoption of the 2015-2013 housing element, including adoption of a negative declaration. City staff?
Thank you, Mayor Cook, members of the City Council. The city's been engaged in an update of its housing element for a while now. We're nearing the finish line, we hope. But as kind of a prelude to the staff report, I want to say that this is a big, complicated, lengthy project, and there's really no way it can be done using simply staff resources. So we're very fortunate to have had consultant assistance led by the M Group, and also as part of their team, Karen Warner Associates. And so with us tonight are Heather Hines and Jacqueline Vance of the M Group and Karen Warner of Karen Warner Associates. So they've been a fantastic resource and just tremendously organized and professional. So
David, can I ask you a question before we begin? I'm just looking for timing.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think that this will take?
This item?
This item.
I'm going to say 5 minutes. No, probably a little bit.
I guess my concern is that at 10 o'clock, if we went past 10 o'clock, I would probably look at council of canceling the last item.
Well, no. My presentation will be brief. The consultant presentation will be expedient, and after that, it's up to the public and the council in terms of how long it takes.
Okay.
But we'll keep it short.
Okay, thank you.
So by way of background, we're updating the housing element. This is, in essence, to require, in essence, is to comply with state requirements and plan for meeting our updated regional housing needs. This is signed by the Association of Bay Area Governments. The housing element is used to plan for existing and future housing needs of the community. And as I mentioned, this is a complicated process, mainly because it's governed by a very extensive set of state laws that establish content requirements for housing elements, including updated housing and demographic information, an analysis of what's known as the city's fair share requirement for the provision of housing associated with the regional housing needs determination. A housing element must have a detailed inventory and assessment of vacant and underutilized sites within city limits that are potentially suitable for housing development. The element must include a review of progress in meeting housing policies and implementation measures set forth in the existing housing element. It will include an analysis of constraints on housing production, including both governmental and non-governmental restrictions. And it will set forth policies and programs with numerical objectives aimed at meeting local housing needs, including areas of production, conservation, and rehabilitation. And lastly, it must include a discussion of public participation. So we will briefly get into these different issues, but just in a thumbnail sketch, while revisions have been made throughout this document, this is an update of an existing document. The update retains the basic organization and direction set forth in the 2009 housing element. That was a very successful document. We accomplished a lot under that housing element, and so we wanted to retain and build on the successful programs within it. That said, there are some changes. That this new revision adds new programs to address changed circumstances and comply with recent legislation. We would want to emphasize that the housing element update will not result in any changes in land use designation or rezonings, as the land inventory analysis found that existing development capacity is sufficient to meet projected housing needs. And as the consultant team will get into, to promote public participation in the update process, surveys of the general public and the business community were performed, a community meeting was held, and a joint City Council Planning Commission study session was conducted, along with additional hearings both before the Planning Commission and now the City Council. So to talk just for a moment about what triggered all of this, the kind of inciting factor for updating the housing element is the update of the city's regional housing needs determination. That necessitated this whole process and the changes that we needed to make throughout the document. But basically, from time to time, under a state-mandated process, all jurisdictions within the state of California receive what's called a regional housing needs assessment. That's also known as a fair share requirement. And once these updated assessments are made, and they're made on a regional basis, and we're part of the Association of Bay Area Governments region, jurisdictions within that region are required to update their housing elements to show that they have the land capacity and the programs that are necessary to at least not form a barrier towards meeting these needs. So Sonoma's most recent housing needs allocation, which is for the planning period of 2015-2023, consists of 24 very low income units, 23 low income units, 27 moderate income units, and 63 above moderate income units, for a total of 137 housing units during that planning period. Now, we want to emphasize that the city's legal responsibility with regard to the housing element and the fair share allegation is to show that opportunities exist, including adequate sites that allow for the units to be built. It's not the city's responsibility to fund each and every unit. Nonetheless, it's very clear that the housing market will not produce low and very low income units without substantial incentives, including financial assistance, which leads back to different programs in the housing element that are designed to assist in that manner. Now, to speak more generally about policy directions and areas of change, we've identified 11 different areas in summary that are addressed in the staff report. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but just to hit a couple of the highlights. First, all of our policies and programs emphasize partnerships and collaborations with nonprofit entities and outside governmental agencies. This is in recognition of the fact that the city's housing resources are limited, more limited than they ever have been, really, with the loss of redevelopment. So that's a theme found throughout the policies and programs in this document. It's not a new direction to the update, but it's even more important now than it has ever been. We've touched on the identification of adequate sites. A key requirement of housing element law is that a jurisdiction must show that it has adequate vacant and underutilized land zoned at suitable densities to accommodate its regional housing needs allocation for the different income categories that we are talking about: very low, low, and moderate income units. The draft housing element includes an updated inventory of vacant and underutilized sites within city limits in the sphere of influence. And based on that inventory, we can demonstrate that we have sufficient land capacity at the required densities. So there is no need for any rezonings or general plan amendments to show that we have sufficient opportunity to meet our fair share allocation. Financial resources, that has been a big theme of this update in light of the loss of redevelopment. Redevelopment was the major funding source for the city's housing programs, and now that funding is gone. So in order to address that issue, at least in part, a program has been added that calls upon the city to investigate establishing affordable housing impact fees. So this program doesn't mandate a particular outcome. It simply states that the city is going to conduct, in essence, a nexus study to show what the connection is between new development within city limits and the need for affordable housing, and if there can, and what might be a financial linkage between a particular development and meeting the city's affordable housing needs that might lead to a fee. So that's a study that would need to be performed, and at that point the council would then need to decide if it wishes to impose such a fee, and if so, at what level. Could be at 100% of whatever the nexus was found to be, or it could be at some lesser level. But in any event, I just want to make it clear that while the housing element would commit us to performing that study, it does not commit us to establishing that fee. That's going to be a separate action taken down the road, a separate consideration. The inclusionary requirement, that is an existing program. It's a long-standing program that in essence requires developments of 5 or more units to provide what's known as inclusionary affordable units. That is, units that are built by the private sector, but that are encumbered by an affordable housing covenant that makes them, that keeps them affordable at either the low or the moderate income level, is the way that Sonoma's program is designed. And in most cases, because it's a choice, a developer will choose to provide any required units under that program at the moderate income level. Now, we've found that the market actually has available in Sonoma moderate units that are affordable at the moderate income level without restrictions. So if you own a moderate income restricted unit and you decide that it's time for you to move on and you want to sell that unit, then you're in essence competing against, say, another condominium elsewhere in the city that is of a similar price, but that is not restricted in terms of that type of covenant. And that can lead to problems for the seller of that affordable unit. So we'd like to take a look at that issue and address it. And one possibility would be to require that the units be provided at the low income level, because the market is not providing us with such units, at least not in any quantity, and possibly reducing the number of units that are required in trade-off. So we need to look at the inclusionary rules and make sure that they're working well, both in providing affordable housing and for the buyers of those units. Mobile home parks. Throughout the course of the update, we've received many comments and suggestions from residents of the city's mobile home parks. And based on this feedback, the Planning Commission, when it reviewed the housing element most recently in January, added an implementation program that calls upon the city to evaluate options for maintaining the Pueblo Serena and Rancho de Sonoma mobile home parks as senior only. And I'm call out those 2 parks by name because the third park, the Moon Valley Mobile Home Park, was converted to all age several years ago. So again, this program does not commit the city to that concept, but does call upon the city to evaluate it and determine whether it's worth pursuing. In addition, Implementation Program 11, which calls for maintaining and enforcing the mobile home rent control ordinance, was amended by the Planning Commission to add the suggestion that the city consider updating the ordinance. And again, we would just want to emphasize that this change, while it calls for study and review, does not mandate that the council take any particular outcome at the end of that process. And this is an issue that the council has already, at a recent meeting, seemingly agreed to take on through a series of study sessions on the mobile home ordinance. So I'll just leave it to questions from the council later on for the other kinds of directions and issues and changes that have been made throughout this process. But in the interest of just moving on to the consultant portion, I want to just add that first, with respect to review by the Department of Housing and Community Development, that's a crucial element of this process, because once a housing element has been updated, it goes through a certification process by HCD. And if HCD certifies your housing element, then many good things happen. You are eligible for different kinds of funding. You are protected from certain kinds of lawsuits. But if you are not certified by HCD, then it's the opposite. You lose access to a wide range of funding. Your community is vulnerable to lawsuit over your housing element. Now, the HCD review process is basically designed to make sure that your housing element complies with these different legislative requirements that are set forth in state law. And so prior to bringing the element forward for final review by the Planning Commission, the draft element was submitted to HCD for, in essence, a pre-review, and they got back to us very quickly with just 3 simple suggestions for change. First, to add language confirming that the unincorporated areas adjoining city limits don't meet the definition of what's known as a disadvantaged community. Second, to clarify that the term persons with disabilities includes the developmentally disabled. And third, to expand the discussion of zoning capacity for emergency shelters to show that it's possible to meet potential shelter needs on existing sites having the public zoning designation. The consultant team sent proposed revisions to HCD that same week. They wrote to confirm that the updated housing element with those revisions would qualify for certification, and the revisions were reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission at the January 22nd meeting. So this is a different process for the housing element update in terms of HCD certification. It's a much better process because we know going in that where we stand, and we want to make it clear to the council that if and when you move forward on the housing element update, it will qualify for certification. And lastly, as part of my presentation, I wanted to just note that the housing element is a project as defined under the California Environmental Quality Act, meaning it is subject to environmental review, and so accordingly we prepared an initial study to document whether or not it would have any potential environmental impacts. And through that process, we are recommending the adoption of a negative declaration. In essence, we don't believe that the housing element adoption will have any significant impact on the environment for a variety of reasons. The housing element itself is a policy document. It does not call for any rezonings or general plan amendments. The housing needs allocation that it addresses, those 137 units, that represents a level of development that is already anticipated in the general plan and that's consistent with the city's growth management ordinance. And lastly, individual housing projects that might be proposed under this revised housing element will be subject to environmental review. So as part of the actions that were before the council tonight, one of those does include a resolution that would adopt a negative declaration. And that just brings me to the staff recommendation. We're recommending tonight that the council adopt a resolution making findings for a negative declaration and adopt a resolution that would adopt the updated housing element for 2015-2023, including the revisions made in response to the comments of HCD. Now, this is a public hearing tonight, and this is also a council discussion opportunity, and so we're perfectly well prepared if council members identify changes that need to be made or additional analysis that you might want to see to get that done right away. But if you are ready to adopt the housing element, it is ready to be adopted. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Heather Hines of the M Group. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Cook, council members. We're very pleased to be here tonight. David covered a lot of information, so where I have duplication, I'll kind of breeze through it to keep things moving. So we're getting close to the end of this housing element update process, so we're very excited to be here and show you kind of where we are and what we've done and who we've talked to. I'm going to run through project timeline, a little bit of a housing element overview, and also touching on a short recap of the housing needs, outline our public outreach efforts that we did undertake, and then I'm going to hand it over to Karen to talk a little bit about the changes that are being proposed with this update. So you'll see from this project timeline that we have been undertaking this process since April of 2014, and we are now nearing completion with that yellow circle at the end, which started with the Planning Commission hearing in January, and now we're before the council. And once the council adopts the housing element, it will go back to HCD for final certification. So David touched on the fact that this is an update to your previous housing element, which was certified in 2010. And also, really the purpose of your housing element is to plan for the future, to plan to meet existing and projected housing needs of all economic segments of the community. The emphasis there is it's not to build it, it's not to fund it, it's to plan for it. And housing element is a required general plan element. It's different than the other elements in that it is a required element and it's required to be updated on a certain cycle and to get review from the state. So that's kind of what sets it apart from many of the other elements. Looking at the major components, talking about a review of your past performance. So this is really looking at, did the city comply with what it set out to comply with in terms of programs, evaluating new ordinances that was put in the last housing element. So that's one of the elements we look at. Also a housing needs assessment to look at what are Sonoma's housing needs based on the most current data we have. Evaluation of constraints to housing, identification of the residential sites to meet the RHNA, and David touched on this, what the RHNA is, and also the fact that through this process there are no zoning changes needed to meet that RHNA. So I'll touch on that a little bit further, and then also the programs. These are the strategies. What is Sonoma the strategies for facilitating and planning for the affordable housing to meet the needs? So touching on some of the kind of the larger issues that came out during the housing needs assessment, and this is really a summary. This is all the information, the most current information we had to try to look at what does Sonoma need to meet the housing needs of residents. And one of the big things in Sonoma is the senior population. 37% of Sonoma's households are senior households, and 60% of those are lower income households. So that really sets apart that there's needs for things like smaller units and supportive living environments. That tells us that we need to be looking at programs to address that. Another thing that came up when we were looking at the data was that there's a high level of overpayment, both with Sonoma owners, homeowners, and renters. 20% of owners and 30% of renters spend over a half of their income on their housing expenses. And the third one I wanted to touch on was the jobs housing balance. Only 16% work and live in Sonoma. So that's another thing to really look at as a specific need in Sonoma. This slide shows that RHNA breakdown that David touched on, the 137 units and how those are broken up by income level. So that's one of the things, looking at how to reach those in the numbers and the income levels, how to facilitate that. And this shows one of the elements of the housing element is an opportunity site. So this is looking at the different sites that are available for residential development to help Sonoma meet that RHNA. And under current zoning, current general plan designation, there are current sites available to accommodate 401 units, and the RHNA being 137, so more than enough to accommodate what the RHNA is asking. And it is really important to have more than that base 137, because if you only have that 137, you need to make sure that everything that's happening in the city isn't reducing that available land for that development. So it's really important when HCD is looking at it to show that you have above and beyond just that amount to meet your RHNA. So public outreach is a very essential part of the housing element process. We did a number of things. We kicked off this effort with a Planning Commission study session in April. We then held a public workshop in June of 2014 that was quite well attended. simultaneously with that workshop, we put out a housing survey, and we made that available on the city's website. It was available at City Hall, and it also went out in the mail to interested parties. And that was an extremely successful effort to get input from the community. We had a Planning Commission City Council study session in September where we looked at what the housing needs came up with. That was kind of after the first amount of information was gathered. And then most recently we had our Planning Commission meeting in January, and now we're before the council. So the survey that we did, had 99 responses, which is really a great response to that survey. We were very pleased with that. So just highlighting some of the stuff we learned from that survey. Housing affordability and housing conditions were two things that were identified as primary concerns in Sonoma. 40% of households, housing affordability was a problem, and more than 50% said that housing condition was a problem. We also learned through that survey that homeowners were interested in second units. 1/2 of the homeowners that responded said they would consider adding a second unit, which is a great way to provide the smaller affordable housing opportunities. And then we also learned that 1/3 of the senior respondents that we heard from believed that they would have to leave Sonoma if they couldn't stay in their current homes. We asked for what type of housing respondents thought that Sonoma needed, and what we heard was housing for young families, workforce housing, and single-family homes, and that the highest priority housing needs was planning for housing for all income levels, maintaining that quality of housing stock, and support development of affordable rental housing. Want to recap briefly on what occurred at the Planning Commission hearing. We had 7 public commenters at that meeting during the public hearing, and the commenters touched on senior housing needs as well as rent stabilization in the mobile home parks, and also comments about the sustainability and social equity of affordable housing. After receiving comments and the presentation by staff and the consultants, Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend both the initial study and neg deck and the housing element for adoption. And part of that recommendation was direction to include language about supporting evaluation of a mobile home park overlay program and associated changes that are now in the red line that's before the council for consideration. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen now to touch on the program changes that you see in the draft housing element before you.
Good evening, Mayor Cook and members of the council. Very, very happy to be here, and I will go through this rather quickly. As David has laid the groundwork, the housing element is just a refinement of what was adopted back in 2010. So most of your housing policies and programs are continuation. Things that have changed, the loss of redevelopment money, various refinements to these programs to better address the housing needs. And so I just want to highlight where some of those changes are. In the element, there's the cheat sheet really is the housing program implementation table. It's, I believe it's on page 45. That is a summary of all 20-some programs in the element and the time frame for implementation. It's that summary table then that the city has to report to the state on annually in terms of how it's progressing with implementing all of these programs. So it's a nice way for the council and members of the public to kind of look at what the strategies are of the element and what the time frame is. So the first program I wanted to mention, and David has already talked about this, that is a modification, is your inclusionary housing program. The program action, which has a time frame of 2017, is to reevaluate the inclusionary ordinance. So looking at modifying the affordability level from the current moderate income, which is being provided in the market for ownership condominiums, and looking at a lower level of income targeting to low income. Also looking at possibly reducing the size threshold of when inclusionary requirements kick in. Right now, it's only affects projects of 5 or more units. So, there's a lot of opportunity that is lost to either generate fees or potentially provide affordable units when you're talking about single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes. Second program to mention that is something different is the Land Assembly and Write-Down program, and this really focuses on the previous redevelopment agency-owned Four Corners site that now is under the ownership of the County Housing Authority, but it's for the city's coordination with the County Housing Authority to get an RFP issued so that site can be developed with affordable housing. And the time frame on that is 2015 to get an RFP out. And the capacity of that two-acre site is about 40 affordable units. So that's, a significant contribution to housing. Program 4, adaptive reuse. This is really just something we needed to clarify. There's a typo essentially in the draft element, which needs to be modified. The adaptive reuse ordinance is in place. It focuses on historic structures. There's a description in the element currently that talks about expanding that to non-historic structures, and that's not really something that is that relevant here, so we are recommending removing that. It's the second paragraph under Program 4. But what does remain in this is to evaluate eliminating the option for vacation rentals in adaptive reuse, which is often what is happening with adaptive reuse. So reusing a single family home for a vacation rental. Program 5, alternative housing models, and this is something that the Planning Commission has been interested in, a cottage housing ordinance, so a more affordable form of single family homes. Also, there's been discussion about a junior second unit ordinance, which is really utilizing unused space in a single family home. So, if it's a bedroom or a den, allowing the conversion of that to an independent rental unit. And if you have an ordinance then that encourages that sort of thing, you would look at it, are we going to require additional parking, or because it's in the same square footage of the single family home, whether we have, modified parking requirements for that. So this program is really to look at those two things, the cottage housing and the junior second units. And the time frame for that is 2017. The second dwelling unit program, the city has a great second dwelling unit ordinance. The action item here is to really look at that again in terms of whether you're going to allow second units to be used as vacation rentals, since this is one of the forms of affordable rental housing in the community, and if it's taken away for vacation rentals, it's not available for the local residents. The affordable housing impact fees, and this again David discussed, and this is really is becoming more and more common with many jurisdictions. With the loss of redevelopment, is to conduct a nexus study to show the relationship between market rate development, residential development, commercial development, and the demand for affordable housing, and create a fee structure. So this is to conduct the nexus study to evaluate that, and then so that would be coming down the line, and then it would be a discussion with the council as to whether you want to adopt a affordable housing impact fee. The mobile home park rent stabilization ordinance, that will be studied by the council, I understand, from your last meeting. So that's in here for 2015. You're implementing that, so that's good. The mobile home park senior only occupancy restriction, this again has been added in at the request of the Planning Commission and for 2015. So that will be coming before you. And then the last kind of new program, and the Planning Commission has been discussing this as well, is to reevaluate the multifamily parking standards, which are currently 1.5 spaces per unit, regardless of number of bedrooms, which serves as a disincentive for studio and one-bedroom units. So the program is to reevaluate the parking standards. HCD review, David's discussed this. We have the stamp of the state approval on your draft. It is very important to remain on an 8-year cycle that the element is adopted before the end of May. So if you're late, you don't get 8 is the slogan. So if you're late past that deadline, you revert to a 4-year housing element cycle. So it is important that it's adopted within that time frame. That concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to council. Does council have any questions for staff? Councilmember Agramonte.
Well, I thought this whole process was absolutely unbelievable because it started out in a very different way, and now this end product I think is excellent. Easy to understand, for myself and for anybody who reviews this. So I really appreciate that. And I think it's really, as you said, just a guide on where we can go in the future, which I think it touches on every element. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions before we go to public? I don't really have any questions. I have some comments when it comes back from public. Let's go ahead and open up the public hearing for public comment. At this time, I will ask for 3 minutes. And if you could say your name and your address.
Mayor and Council, my name is Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. I understand that the housing element tonight's about satisfying the state rules, and it's difficult for me to master all the issues. It's fairly complicated, but I do know that there is a housing affordability crisis in the county that's been noted by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So what I'd like to ask is that the council step up and be bold and lead the agenda on this issue. Put proposals out, push back against the gentrification that runs counter to many publicly stated city ideals. Multiple documents such as the general plan, the housing element, the U.S. Census portrait of Sonoma and Climate Action 2020, hazards and vulnerabilities point to affordability and diversity ideals, yet at the same time, we have a crisis in housing availability. The Climate Action 2020 document mentions social vulnerability and climate justice, and that no group of people should disproportionately bear the burden of climate impact or cost of mitigation and adaptation. And yet here we have 2 Sonomas, an hourglass economy, and people whose housing is like an endangered species, people on the margins trickling out of Sonoma with every new condo conversion. Ironically, we have the Tourism Improvement District encouraging the very trends that are causing housing unaffordability. Short-term business gains through tourism, all eggs in one basket, are trumping the above-stated ideals. What good is downtown affordable housing if you can't afford to buy anything downtown? A recent KQAD article I read says that the Bay Area is the king of unaffordability. In Sonoma, you have a large percentage of people overpaying. Homes are out of reach for even moderate incomes, yet Sonoma is committed to providing housing for all segments of the population. I'd say we have enough on the high end already, and that the high end has enough government help. There's a familiar refrain that all boils down to profitability, so we find ourselves in a double bind because no one wants to build affordable housing. So I have a few suggestions. I'll latch on to the areas that David and the consultants have identified that meet the low-income housing needs. Get public corporations to build and have the county fast-track incentives and take the profit out and build for social good and the social fabric. Public corporations is a different model than the profit model, and that could certainly work to meet this need. Bump up the TOT tax and dedicate the money to affordable housing and land acquisition. Put in real estate transfer tax for affordable housing. Take the vertical height limit off the building code. At an 8-story building on a 1-acre lot, then you can have a lot of units in there. I encourage the council to lead the agenda and put items out yourself. You pull the cart. Make the staff react to you, what you see as the right thing to do. I'd like to see someone try to hit a policy three-pointer on this issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred.
My name is Gary Hermes. It's Hermes, and I live at 12 Ramon Street in Rancho de Sonoma. And I've just recently retired from a nonprofit that provides affordable housing, and now I need affordable housing. So I just wanted to thank you for making sure that you will continue to enforce the mobile home space protection ordinance for us, and also that you're looking at updating it. I really appreciate that. It gives us hope. I just wanted to bring your attention to something that I just ran across yesterday. It's an article that appeared in the Peninsula Press, and it refers to the loss of affordable housing in the form of mobile home parks. But first of all, they said that according to a report from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, California is at risk of losing 57,000 federally subsidized affordable apartments through conversion to market rates over the next 5 years. 57,000 affordable homes will be lost in California over the next 5 years. In the next year alone, it will be a loss of 35,000. So mobile homes are a way for us to really preserve some of those losses. However, 400 of those parks have closed over the last 20 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've lost 5,000 mobile home spaces. So since there's no money for new affordable housing, it is really, really critical that we focus a lot of attention on preserving what we've already got. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carla?
Thank you. Carla Noyes, 15549 Brookview Drive, Sonoma. I've got 4 quick points to cover, and I don't really have any answers. If you are paying attention to the real estate market in the Bay Area, you know that housing values are skyrocketing. I don't know if it starts in San Francisco and then people leave like fleas from a dead gopher or something like that, but people are going from San Francisco to Marin, they're moving out of Marin, they're coming to Sonoma. Or they're to the East Bay, and I have a client who were looking for property in El Cerrito and Novato, and they both make good money and are moving out of Sonoma and finally found a place in Novato, and it's very expensive. It's probably, anyway. So housing prices are going up. And another separate point, you know, affordable housing, if you buy it, they will, or if you build it, they will come. You know, how much affordable housing does Sonoma need? Well, okay, 137 units, 150, 300, 500. If you build it, they will come, I think in the thousands. So, and with that, it comes with the traffic and the water use and all the sort of congestion impact. The third point I wanted to make is that on that map that shows about where affordable housing could be built, there's this big pink rectangle over by the river on the left side that is at the end of Curtin Lane, and it's a vineyard and a historic adobe. It's the Andronico adobe, and that is characterized as a potential buildable site for affordable housing. And I don't know, it makes me nervous to think that that could be, I don't know how they could possibly, how you could possibly acquire it, but you know, high-density residential right next to a historic adobe, I don't know, makes my knees shake. Last point is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm pleased to see the mobile home component that you've got in the draft so far. The idea of a senior overlay and an idea of strengthening rent control, that is, you know, the mobile home parks are affordable housing for seniors, and, you know, go.
Thank you, Carla.
Good evening, Mayor Cook and council members and staff. My name is Lynn Marie DeVincent, 65 Guadalajara. I would just like to add my thanks to everyone who's been working on this process. And yes, the mobile home owners are very happy that our concerns have been addressed. And we felt like there was really good teamwork happening within our city among the Planning Commission, the staff, along with the consulting group. Specifically regarding the senior zoning overlay, I just wanted to mention that is like a second layer of protection for the senior status in our parks. And there are many other cities and counties who have it in place, and it has been successfully preventing frivolous lawsuits. But it is an ordinance that requires substantial study and review. So what we've done is suggested, and has been made an objective, to do a long-term review of that in the housing element. That's so that we have time to complete our rent stabilization revision ordinance first. So we're very happy with the objective as it's been stated on page 5 in the summary. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion and action. Is there any council member that has a comment? Vice Mayor Gallion.
I just want to say that I think this has been an incredible job by staff and consultants to put together all the members in this particular element. This is no small task. Having been present through at least the majority of the public meetings, people have actually felt free to be able to speak and comfortable in the settings. This is not something that a lot of people are used to doing, but you know, considering the type of information we've garnered from this, in all the years that I've been in Sonoma, I knew things were bad in some areas as far as affordable housing is concerned, but I don't think I ever really conceptually got as much information as this particular process obtained. And to me, it's you know, definitely a very pressing issue. And so before, when you had the funds, this was something that, you know, you were able to put in plans. You knew you'd have the financing behind it. But what is very difficult for me to embrace at this point is how this is going to happen for us to be able to accomplish all the goals we have identified tonight. So I'm glad that we have a pattern, a plan, you know, some objectives that we have to reach, and I'm very comfortable with what has been proposed here tonight. And there's more to this process. There's more that's not going to happen tonight, but there's more to this process that will happen, and it's an opening. And I think it's important, since we have the relationship with the county itself, as far as our housing is concerned, that we go ahead and we actually show them what our community is actually requesting of us. And this is not just, well, nobody can live here, they can't rent here, whatever. We have a very defined document, and when we go out and we want to have action with the dollars that we are given to go ahead and obtain this objective and work with the county, we have a relationship and a document in which to build in. And I just want to thank you all for doing that. That was exceptional. I have no questions at this point. I was very thorough in reviewing things, and I'm ready to make a motion, but I will defer if any other council members have questions.
Is there any other questions or discussions before a motion? Before a motion, I would just like to say what Vice Mayor Gallion said. This has been a long process. I've been on the council for 2 years and my 3rd year, and I just want to commend city staff for the process and the way we went through this. And I do say that it's moving in the right direction, and I know that there's a lot of concerns, and I do want to thank Public for sitting through the whole RTL, and I apologize having a public hearing at 9:30, but I'm glad that you stayed and you had some great points, and that's what I like about Sonoma, is I like the participation. Councilmember Edwards.
Through the mayor, after serving 6 years on the Planning Commission, our meetings always went later than this, for the most part. And having worked on this, if you don't mind, Vice Mayor Gallion, I'd like to make the motion. So I'll make the motion to move to adopt the negative declaration and adopt the 2015 to 2023 housing element update.
And I would like to second.
And then I think Councilmember Hundley had a question or comment?
I have a comment that I would like to give. So reading all of this, it reminded me a lot of the things that I heard last summer before the election. And so I think that it was done studies. I went back to those public meetings, and I think you've done a really great job. And this document also makes me really hopeful, because I think that there are some real solutions in here that I support. So I know that this document is, it's numbers that we have to write down because, the law says we have to. But I also think that this is a sign that we can really, create positive opportunities for different kinds of people to live here. So I'm excited about this.
Add to that,
yes, Councilmember.
we do have a committed staff who keeps all of us in line from Planning Commission through Council, and I appreciate that.
We're lucky to have Mr. Goodison. I think we all agree. So we have a motion and we have a second. I will call to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Gallion?
Aye.
Mayor Cook?
Aye. And with that, for public, we actually went ahead and okayed the possible action review of the adoption of the 2015-2023 housing element, including adoption of a negative declaration. With that, we're going to move on to 7A. And I'll hold on for about a little bit so a couple people can leave. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go into 7A. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to refer a new street name signage replacement program to the Design Review and Historic Preservation Committee for review. Public Works Director and City Engineer Dan.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. This hopefully will be a quick item. One of the council's goals is to establish a new street signage program to meet the retroreflectivity standards, which have been established by the Federal Highways Administration. And Most of our street name signage is probably out of compliance, as is a lot of our traffic signage, although we have been gradually replacing a lot of our traffic signage. But this opportunity creates a chance for the city to create a new name or a new street name design that would kind of create a sense of place in the city. And we enlisted Bob Sanders, our local sign designer, to come up with some options, which are included in your packet. And of those, have a reader board here, which is identical to what's in your packet. He created a design that has a geometric arch, and then also a historic arch, and then more of a European design on the bottom side. On this particular board, it's a three-color aspect, and any of these can be mixed and matched, and also with a serif font. So there is a little bit of color to the logo design in each of those, being possibly a gold font. And again, the serif font is as shown. And the next board that he created, which is also in your packet, shows a block font, but instead of the three-color design, only has a two-color design, with the logo image being white reflective as well. And when assembled, the top sign of a what we call a cross bracket would have the what might be the design, whether it be arch or European, and the bottom portion of the sign would be rectangular. Unfortunately, Bob Sanders couldn't stick around for all of this to answer any questions, but staff recommendation is to refer to the design review committee to give some advice back to council.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have any council questions for our Public Works Director? I guess I do. So tonight we're just going to be sending it back, possibly with some do you want some recommendations?
I would just leave that up to council if you would like to.
Okay. Yeah. So I do have a couple questions. Because I'm looking at the three designs, two in particular, the City of Sonoma and the bear flag, or the bear, and all these signs would be within the city limits. So the city of Sonoma, do you feel when I was driving down the street and I saw it, would I see the City of Sonoma? I mean, would I be able to read it? Because I can't really tell by the size of the sign.
Yeah, the signs would be about 36 by 6 inches tall. Now, most of the time, it really depends on your speed. That's why when you're going down the freeway, the signs are enormous, and you're going down one of our collector streets, and the signs don't have to be that large. So in answer to your question, I think they would be, I believe that they would be visible, but you'd probably have to be looking a little bit closely.
Then my second question is on color. Is there what colors, I was trying to figure out when I was looking through this, what colors are available?
Well, really, for traffic signage under standard manufacturers and to get the reflectivity that we need, it would either have to be white, blue, green, or brown. And I think Bob Sanders and I felt that brown is the most historic.
And would that be with white lettering? I mean,
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other council questions? Councilmember Edwards?
So Dan, that's what we have currently is brown.
We do,
And white.
but it's not as reflective as it should be.
Right. So just if we're going to pass a recommendation along, I would have, I like the three color, and anything with a bear on it is fine.
And I should mention, too, that The bear with stars matches the new directional sign in front of the plaza in design.
Okay. Okay. If there's not any council questions, I'm going to go out to public and then
I
we'll.
have a question.
Okay.
Well, everybody I know who moves here, I say, please be careful at night because it's very dark. So I love this font, but at night, I don't know. To me, I would like it to be as thick as possible, you know, the writing. That's just me personally, because it is so hard to see signs in the dark. It's just so dark, and it's scary. And I'm a fast driver, but I drive slow here. I'm just making that comment. I just think it has to be very bold, whatever the font is.
If we don't have any other council questions, I'm going to go ahead and go out to public, and please limit it to 3 minutes. And seeing none, we will come back. Councilmember Hundley, you have a comment?
Yes, out of all of these, I like the 3-color the best. I like the historic arch, and I was got really excited when I saw the bear because embracing our historic roots is something that I want us to do in many aspects, so this is sort of a perfect way to put it on every street corner. And then as far as the fonts go, I think that the serif looks classier, but I think that the sans serif would be easier to read, but I would be happy with either.
Is there any other comments? Vice Mayor Gallion?
I definitely feel the 3 colors. I have an affinity towards the bear as the historic, and I absolutely, I would defer to the design review for what they felt was a more appropriate font, because that's what they actually deal with, but I would like to go the 3 colors.
And I will add my 2 cents. I really think that I like the city of Sonoma on the top, and I'll tell you why. That way people will know who lives in Sonoma and who doesn't live in Sonoma, which is the biggest question that I get is I always ask them what their address. So I assume, and that's why it wasn't really a dumb question, because when you look at signage, this would actually be within the city limits.
Correct. And one of the first places that we would start the program are on the arterials. So you'd immediately see the change from the county's green and white signs to the city signs.
Yeah. And then I do like the brown and white. And as far as font, it would be, I'd probably go with Councilmember Agramonte. The bigger, the better, so you can see them at night. So at this point, this is a non-voting item, just a recommendation? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So did every council member feel that they were able to give their...
I'll acquiesce and say the city of Sonoma, I'm not too excited about the bear, but I prefer the vine, but I would go with you with city of Sonoma. Because it's kind of interesting, you know, throughout, we've all run for office. I can't vote for you because I don't live here. And everybody...
Just look at the street sign.
Even though they all
If I can add to that.
Sonoma, they say.
If you don't mind me interrupting a little bit, but you know, we all live in Sonoma, the entire valley.
Well, that's
And when you start saying, well, I live in Sonoma and you don't, even though your address says Sonoma, no matter where you live in the valley, for the most part, you know, and
Steve Barbos was famous for saying that.
But the point is that's what we're here for. So if we're going to start saying you don't live in Sonoma, I don't buy that argument. Well, that's not the point. The point is what you're saying is that, let's say, put City of Sonoma on it so you know where the line is. And I don't think that makes sense.
I think it's just our opinion at this point. So if to give direction, I think that we have 3 with the bear. This is just for the recommendation, and 2 for the city of Sonoma. And to kind of correct a little bit, yes, we feel that everybody does live in Sonoma Valley, Sonoma Valley, but I will say that I do get a lot of people asking me where the city limits are, and
And you do have signs.
we have a couple, yeah. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I just wanted to say, I think we all commented, but I don't know that I said historical arch. I definitely like the historical arch on the top, because there are 3 different kinds.
Yeah, and I like the arch. I think that was the only. Okay. Councilmember Hundley?
Excuse me. I'm just going to say that I think it's kind of beautiful that people don't know where the city line is just because we're one big happy community.
With that, we're going to go to. Oh, yeah. Okay, does staff feel like they have enough direction to go to the DRC? Okay, with that, we are going to go to the regular council successor agency. We do not have none. Council members' reports and comments. Who would like to begin? Vice Mayor Gallion.
This is very brief. I received an update from the North Bay Division, League of California Cities. Just want to remind everyone that the next quarterly division meeting will be in Napa on April 16th. We're going to be discussing the emergency response to natural disasters, focusing on mutual aid. It'll be actually in the Historic Opera Building in downtown Napa, and this was one of those that was affected by the earthquake. So they are currently open for business, and what's interesting is that there'll be a 6-minute video that they have put together concerning their response to the earthquake. So it should be a very interesting meeting as far as that's concerned. Just wanted to make sure that you all know Legislative Action Day is in Sacramento on April 29th, and currently our representative Nancy Hall Bennett, okay, wishes to have you sign up, and that completes my report.
Councilmember Hundley.
I didn't have any meetings, but I did go to the Miss Sonoma County pageant with my colleagues, Mayor Cook and Vice Mayor Gallion.
And Cook drove.
And he even was a driver. It was really fun, but there were no young ladies from the city of Sonoma or even Sonoma Valley. So I'm hoping next year we can get some representation because we have a lot of talent here.
Thank you. Okay, well, that leaves it to me. I actually wanted to call out to Barbara and Dorothy, who said they were going to be watching. Hopefully they're still watching. Dorothy, I hope she's getting better, wasn't able to come to our meeting tonight. And also, I do agree with Councilmember Hundley. I would like to see more contestants come from Sonoma, so hopefully we can work on that for the next year. I went to a library advisory committee, and I want to thank City Manager for coming all the way back from Sacramento to attend that, and we were just trying to figure out how we can have more book storage at the library because they are about 13,000 every quarter on the book sales. So we're gonna form an ad hoc with myself, our city manager, along with the Friends of the Library chair, which will be great. And I just wanted to say I want everybody to have a safe St. Paddy's Day. I know there's a lot of celebrations going on, but remember, please do not drink and drive, and we're all have a little bit of Irish in us somewhere, so enjoy.
And just one last thing.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
There's a very auspicious event that's happening this weekend, and it is Mayor Cook's birthday. So I would like to end the meeting singing him happy birthday.
We still have the city manager report.
Yes.
Unless you want to sing happy birthday to me, a solo.
Okay. All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mayor. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. And for the crowd, I'm 49 years old and I'm proud. So I'm going to go ahead and go out to public for comment.
You look 42.
Thank you. That's a great comment. The best comment of the night, and I'll adjourn on that comment.